So let's start to explore the fundamentals of root cause analysis. And the first thing we need to look at is what actually is RCA? What do we mean when we talk about RCA? Well, a root cause analysis is something conducted to understand the why behind an issue. Why has this issue occurred? Why are we seeing this problem? Why are our key indicators flagging red? And it seeks to discover the cause of an error, a mishap, or an issue. So root cause analysis is not just about identifying what has gone wrong and what can we do to solve for this. It's about understanding the cause. How can we fix this issue for the long term if we don't actually know what caused it in the first place? We need good root cause analysis to understand why did this occur? And that enables us to say, right, we can do X, Y, and Z to stop this from occurring again in the future. Now, RCAs are usually preceded by data which shows that something has actually gone wrong. So your key SLAs could be flagging red, your KPIs could be falling behind, or your customers could be complaining. And this is why having good, solid data is so important when it comes to organizations. If you don't have good data, how can you see what is happening in your processes, your departments, your wider organization? Without that data, you cannot see that. If customer complaints are increasing and you're not recording that data, you're not monitoring your customers in terms of their experience of your products and services, how can you see what is happening? You might get a feeling that something is going wrong, but how would you have tangible information to show, yes, there's a problem here, we need to root cause that? We haven't got that information to hand. Therefore, good data is definitely a precursor to good root cause analysis. And you'll find yourself asking the question, why is this happening? Why has this error occurred? And why is this going wrong? So if you're looking into your data, if you're looking at a problem that's occurred with, for example, in a call center with the phones, or in a finance department with a number of the different reports that come in, why is this happening? If you see yourself asking the question, why, this is often an indicator that yes, a root cause analysis is required. And this shows that actually with root cause analysis, you can do a root cause analysis on a daily basis. Even the smallest things, if you're sat at your desk and you say, why has this occurred today? Why have I come to my desk today and this issue is in my inbox? Even the smallest things can be root cause analyzed, as well as the bigger things, the really big picture things. And asking yourself the question why is often the first step in conducting a root cause analysis. This is the trigger. Now, what comes next is a defined method or approach, which then looks to explore this question further and ultimately to provide you with an answer. You cannot leave a root cause analysis without having your why question answered, right? If you're saying, why is this happening? You need to leave that process understanding fully, this is why that happened, and this is what I can do to solve for this. So let's look at an example. So the phone lines went down in the call center for 30 minutes on Tuesday morning because of an electrical fault in the electrics cupboard. Now, this occurred because of exposed wiring following some work on the electrical unit in the previous week that was not fixed. Going forward, any work conducted on electrical wiring in the building will need to be signed off first to ensure all safety measures have been correctly adhered to. So this is a straightforward basic root cause of what happened here, but let's explore with some more detail. So firstly, we can see here, the phone lines went down in the call center for 30 minutes on Tuesday. So we can see very clearly here what our red flag was. The red flag was everyone was sat around for 30 minutes without a phone line, right? They couldn't do their job. That is the red flag. We have a time here, 30 minutes. We have a date, Tuesday morning, right? When you're thinking about your root cause analysis, we're looking at your issue, try and put a timestamp on it. How often has this issue been occurring? How frequently? When does it occur? Is there a trend? Try and think about those things, try and locate that sort of information. So we can see here, it's because of an electrical fault in the electrics cupboard, right? So that would be the first stage of the root cause. Okay, our first root cause is an electrical fault in the electrics cupboard. This is the root cause. But actually, we need to understand, so why did that electrical fault happen in the first place? Well, this occurred because of exposed wiring. Okay, so why was there exposed wiring? Well, there was some work in the electrical unit in the previous week, and this exposed wiring was left. It wasn't fixed. Now, of course, you can go deeper and deeper to understand why did they not fix that? Why did they walk away? But we're trying to solve for the issue here of the phone lines going down. So we can then put in, the great thing about an RCA is that then you can put in a really good control or improvement suggestion. So going forward, any work conducted on electrical wiring in the building will need to be signed off first to ensure all safety measures have been correctly adhered to. So that's what's so good about RCA. Not only are you identifying what went wrong, what caused that to go wrong, but what you can do to fix that for the long term. That's why RCAs are so powerful as tools to use within organizations. Now, an RCA is ultimately there to give you insight and answers which can help you make further decisions. Now, I've worked in many projects and many RCAs over the years, and a number of organizations don't actually take what comes from those RCAs and turn them into actual insight, right? They see the information, they can see what's gone wrong, they say they're going to deploy changes to make sure that doesn't happen again, and they don't. And I've seen time and time again the detrimental impact that can have on that organization. So make sure whatever comes out of your RCA in terms of information, what's gone wrong, learn from it, put the right controls in place, and make sure it does not happen again. That is the power of an RCA. So now we understand what an RCA actually is. We need to think through what is the purpose of the RCA. Now, we have touched on that somewhat in the previous slides, but we can actually go further when it comes to an RCA. So a root cause analysis is a very important tool that organizations use to understand better what issues have occurred, why they have occurred, and what actions need to be taken to stop them from reoccurring. So straight away, as we've touched on before, we can see three really good points that come from an RCA. We can understand better what issue has occurred, right? We can understand that first. We can then understand the why behind that. Why has this issue occurred in the first place? And then we can understand what actions need to be taken to stop that from occurring again in the future. There's no point in conducting a really good RCA into an issue to understand what's gone wrong and why, if you're not going to deliver great solutions to come from that. Otherwise, the RCA then is redundant, right? The purpose of an RCA is to actually use the information that comes from the RCA. They give the user a chance to use a structured and formal approach to conduct the investigation. And they give the user options when it comes to what tool to use to conduct the investigation. So as we'll explore throughout this course, there are many different tools and approaches and ideas that you can use when it comes to root cause analysis. There's not a one size fits all for everyone. And that's the strength of root cause analysis. There are many different ways in which you can do a root cause analysis. You will tailor that to what you need and what your particular problem or issue actually is. Now, by having these two things, it gives leaders confidence that the right cause has been identified and ultimately that the right solution will be implemented. So if you're thinking about all the different root cause tools that you've got at your disposal, you can choose the right tool for the right problem, for the right organization, the right team, the right department. Your leaders then know, okay, I know root cause analysis has many different avenues you can go down. And I know, therefore, it's not a one size fits all. We've tried to kind of fudge the answer. We've tailored this to our issues, our problems. We haven't tried to tailor our business to fit the tool, right? The tool fits the issue. And your leaders will have confidence that this has been the case. Different root cause analysis tools, they do different things. So some will define exactly what the cause of an issue is. Some can categorize potential causes. Some offer quick hit solutions to fix those issues. And it really depends on what you actually want to get out of your tool. And that's the great thing about root cause analysis. There are many different tools available in your toolkit. A key purpose of root cause analysis that I've seen deployed over many years is to save time and money, reduce issues and errors, and increase customer and colleague satisfaction. Given the range of abilities, RCA knowledge is extremely appealing in organizations. So one of the greatest things about root cause analysis is, yes, you identify your problems, yes, you identify the reasons, and you fix those things, but all of that has a knock-on impact. Right, it's saving you time. You're not having to go in and fix errors constantly because you're now putting in fixes that last for the long term. It reduces those errors and issues. You're increasing how happy your customers are. You're increasing the satisfaction of your colleagues. You're saving time. You're saving money. All of these approaches have a knock-on impact that are good for your business. And indeed, having the knowledge and experience to deliver effective root cause analysis in organizations is a skill highly sought after today, given the increasing complexities around the world of work. I've spoken to many organizations, and one of the key skills they really wish that staff had was the ability to root cause. right? Leaders don't want people to come up to them and say, we have this issue, this has gone wrong in our team, this has gone wrong in our department. They want you to come to them and say, this is what's gone wrong, this is the solution we've identified, this is how we're going to implement it. And then you can sign off as a leader, yes or no, that's fine, right? They want people to come to them with, yes, their problems, but also what potential solutions can actually happen. So therefore, having that root cause analysis knowledge and experience is very, very highly sought after in today's world of work. So to continue to look at the fundamentals of RCA, we can now look at the importance of RCA. And I think it's becoming quite clear what the importance of RCA actually is at this stage, but there's some more we can go to talk about this. So the process and the tools on offer when it comes to root cause analysis, well, they're vitally important as they provide users with a framework within which to operate successfully. Many ideas out there around fixing things, issue resolution, conflict resolution may be great in theory, but they don't give you the tools and that really strong framework to operate successfully. Root cause analysis enables you to have just that. Issues, errors, and mishaps occur in organizations all the time, every minute of every day. Therefore, having an effective way to understand and solve these is critical. If you think about a normal, ordinary day in an office or digitally with our teams these days, think about how many times someone in a meeting or via email will say, this has gone wrong, this is the issue, I've had to fix this today, I had to work on this today, we've identified X, Y, and Z to gone wrong in the project, right? That is a conversation that comes up pretty much every single day. If we can give people the ability to root cause these issues as they arise and avoid the need to go and complain about them or feedback on them or escalate them, think about how much time that saves, how much effort that saves. People don't want to hear people complaining about issues all the time. This has gone wrong, that's gone wrong, I need to fix this and this. People want to hear people say, this did go wrong, but this is the solution we've delivered, right? Or someone comes to you and says, I heard this has gone wrong. Oh, it did go wrong, yes, but we fixed it, right? Let's try and change that mindset within organizations, change that culture within organizations, and not be kind of that reactive, oh, this has gone wrong. Let's be more proactive. And that's what's so good about root cause analysis and having that skill within organizations today. Now, it is important that we learn from our mistakes. If we know something has gone wrong, not only do we need to put a fix in place, but a fix that lasts and stops the reoccurrence of that issue. I would say 9 times out of 10, people identify the problem, the cause, and very rarely do they identify a really good solution to fix that for the long term. And then what happens as we go further down the line in a few weeks or months, that issue then happens again. You need to solve for that problem for the long term. Root cause analysis can also highlight the need to move some processes away from human or manual intervention towards more automated solutions, right? In my experience after working in this for many years, I would say between 70 to 80%, more 80% of errors are caused by humans. And if we have an issue with a system or an interface issue or a technical issue, often it could be because a human has inputted the wrong information, the wrong data, pressed the wrong button on the system. So if we can kind of show the importance of shifting away from that human manual intervention and kind of giving humans more value adding tasks and moving those basic, more mundane, everyday tasks to an automated solution, this can reduce errors substantially within organizations. And root cause analysis enables us to do that. I've worked with a company before where we had around 1,000 errors on that sheet, and they filtered by humans, and they could see around 85% of all those errors were caused by humans. And this just gets you thinking, how can we shift all of this work away from humans? It's often basic work, it's checking, it's those kind of basic tasks, and give them to an automated solution. So therefore the human can then start working on more value adding tasks. And again, enables you to start thinking about these things. That's what's so important about RCA. And finally, if employees see errors occurring and not being investigated or rectified, what is to stop them from learning from their mistakes and seeking to avoid or repeating them? Right? If something's going wrong and they can see that they can do it wrong again and again, and no one's rectifying them, no one's kind of talking to them about this and saying, this has gone wrong, how are we going to solve for this? If they see these problems happening again and again, and they just get used to it, they may put a sticking plaster on, but actually they're not solving for the long term. So why would they start to then innovate a solution to fix these things? That's why having that knowledge of RCA, having that skill set around RCA is really important. And making sure all of our teams and individuals have that knowledge is vitally, vitally important. So now let's look at the scenario that we're going to explore in this course. So to help you to navigate this RCA course as well as possible, I'm going to set up a scenario that we're going to follow throughout this course. Now, this scenario will enable you to understand visually and practically how to deliver each step of the process as laid out, as well as how to populate the key root cause analysis document that you will need to populate as you go through this process. And we're going to cover that off more shortly. So the scenario is as follows. So we have a customer contact center within an insurance company. The center handles complaints, product queries, and sales for the whole company. The size of this department is 20 agents and 2 managers. Within the past month, we have seen a 3-fold increase in the number of complaints coming in to the center, with the nature of these complaints being mainly focused around unhappiness with the service being offered at the contact center itself. On an average month over the past year, 15 complaints of this nature would be received. This month, it hit 45. The trend is now continuing upward, but so far we've been unable to understand what it is about the service they're specifically unhappy about. So to understand why this is the case, we have to conduct a root cause analysis exercise. We will need to leverage the data, the knowledge of those within the process, and the ideas of the wider team in order to do this. So this is the scenario that we're going to follow throughout this course. So as we go through some of the key steps, as we go through that root cause analysis document, we're going to use this particular scenario so you can see visually and practically how do you deploy the root cause analysis process as effectively as possible. So now we're going to explore the process of root cause analysis. And there is a process when it comes to root cause analysis. It's not just about saying, okay, here's a tool, go in, deep dive into the issue and try and solve for it, right? There is actually a process that comes behind it if you really want to deliver effective and detailed root cause analysis. So the first step is you need to define the problem. What has actually occurred here in the first place? Then you want to collect some data. Collect some information to show, okay, let's show the problem at hand. Let's actually evidence off there is actually something wrong in the first place. Then you want to identify the possible causes. This is not about saying what exactly has gone wrong. We want to identify all the possible causes that could have led to this issue happening. Then we'll break those down and start to identify the root causes behind them to try and get to the ultimate root cause that you can then seek a solution for. You then want to identify the solutions behind these root causes. You then want to test the solutions to see if actually they're feasible at fixing this for the long term. You can then implement your solutions to make sure the fixes then go into place. And then you want to monitor your controls. So once you've got your solutions delivered, you then need to monitor those solutions to make sure that they actually are working for the long term. So this is that key 8-step process, and we're going to go into each step individually in the next section. So before we look at the process in more detail, I want to cover off just very briefly what is known as the RCA document. Now, when I run root cause analysis, I will always pull together a document as I run through that process. So obviously we have an 8-step process, and I like to have an 8-step document involved. And the root cause analysis document will look something like this. So it'll have all of your information in terms of each step. So it'll look at what you've done to define the problem, the data you've collected, the information you've got, the cause you've identified, the root cause you've identified, the solutions, testing, implementation of those, and then the control measures you put in place. Now, this is something you don't have to actually do to conduct root cause analysis, but I think it's highly important that you do this. I've worked in a number of projects before where you sometimes need to get buy-in from leaders who don't really know much about root cause analysis or about the projects you're working on. And having a document like this to show this is the process, this is the thought process, this is the work I've done behind it, these are the actions we took, this is how we got to our solutions, to our causes, to our controls, really actually helps to sell what you're doing. If you deliver a really good root cause analysis that leads to big savings, big error reductions, you want to celebrate that, right? You want to make sure that you're actually championing that and saying, this is the work we've done. This document enables you to do that. It enables you to get buy-in from leaders to conduct this root cause analysis, but also future root cause analysis, right? You can show them and say, this is what we did in the past. This is how successful it was. We also can use the document to show this is the process. So if other teams want to start to learn root cause analysis and kind of have those skill sets, you can show the process through such a document. You can obviously use it for lessons learned. What went right in this particular root cause analysis project, but what didn't go so right? How can we solution for that in the future? And it's a repository of all the information that you pulled together to show your workings out, right? If you've done a good job, use this document and celebrate this and use that document for others in the organization to see what you've done and how you actually did it. So when it comes to root cause analysis, you do not have to do a document, but if you're going to pull that information together anyway, it's best to put it into a document, get it all together. And as we go through the process, we'll kind of show you how to do that if needs be. Step 1, define the problem. So the first step of the process of completing an RCA is to define the problem. So this will be the problem that we have at hand, or it could be the problems. So the first thing we need to do is identify, is there actually a problem? Often it can be the case that there may be something that we can physically see and we know it's a problem, but it can also be the case that maybe a team come to us and say, there's an issue within our team, within our processes, can you come and look at this? Either way, we need to identify that there's a problem. So this can be seen in a number of ways. You physically see an issue or error occurring within the workplace. Now this could be a physical thing. So you see continuously seeing accidents happening in a specific part of the workplace, or you can see that the setup of how people sit within an organization isn't actually quite physically beneficial for that team. This is something you can physically see. You see on one of the systems, your KPIs are being missed and are flagging as red. Again, this is a visual thing. I can see there's an issue with my KPIs. They're not being met. Customers start to complain about a particular product or experience. Again, you see that in the figures, customer complaints are spiking because of a particular product. You then have to investigate. A process breaks down somewhere. This will eventually, at some point further downstream, have a knock-on impact, which you can then start to see. Staff or specific teams start to become unhappy with their roles. You see more complaints from that particular team, more noise around the office around that particular team. You see an increase in costs from a particular area of the business. These are all things in which you can actually see something going wrong. You can see there's an issue or a problem, and this requires further investigation. So you then need to define exactly what the problem is. Here, you need to think about what is the problem, where it is, when it's occurring, how frequent it is, and what its impact is. Finding out as much as possible at this stage will help you RCA further down the line. So a good example here would be this. We have seen an increase in customer complaints regarding the insurance team in our call center over the past month. Now, this is a good definition of the problem. Why? Well, here you can see what the problem is, where it's occurring, how it's being flagged up, who it's affecting, and the time frame in which this has occurred. So that's a good example there of defining the problem. Once you've done that, you have completed step 1 of this process. So now you know how to define your problem. We now need to think about it in terms of writing this up within our RCA document. So let's take an example as based on the scenario we've set out earlier on in this course. So firstly, you want to define your problem. So we have seen an increase in the number of customer complaints we're receiving in regards to our insurance team call center operatives. This increase has been seen over the past month. The complaints are mainly focused on unhappiness with the service being offered in the contact center, but little more is known at this stage. So this clearly sets out that A, we're having a number of customer complaints, right? Those customer complaints are going up. Secondly, this is in relation to that particular team, so the insurance team call center operatives. We can see in the time frame, this has been over the past month. We can see that actually the root cause, initial root cause, is around unhappiness of the service being offered within that center. And we're saying we don't know much more, right? So we don't know the actual reason for that. We know the reason for the calls, unhappiness with the service. but why is that service not delivering what they expect, right? So we then know we need to continue to root cause deeper. This then sets the stage, right? So we say little more is known at this stage. We need to root cause. So next you need to look at what are the initial indicators. So what is the data telling us? The average number of customer complaints over the past year has remained consistent at around 15 a month, with the highest spike being 19. Over the past 4 weeks, we have seen 45 customer complaints. The weekly trend is up and it continues to trend upwards. So we're stating clearly here, the data is showing that there is a problem. We have consistent trends over the past year showing consistently around 15. The biggest was 19. We're now 3 times that. We're 3 times the average, and the trend continues to go upwards. So we can see here we've got a problem, and it's a growing problem. Then state, how was the issue discovered? The team began to highlight to management during the daily huddle that they had seen a noticeable uptick in the number of customer complaints coming through. So be clear and concise. How did we discover this issue? Was it a decrease in sales? Was it an increase in complaints? Was it increase in turnover of staff? Whatever that issue was, state it. How did we actually see that? So when it comes to defining your problem, make sure you define the problem, the initial indicators, and how the issue was discovered. But again, as with all this information, as all these documents and all these tools and all these steps, be very clear, be very concise. People don't want you to go into too much detail where they get lost. They want to know exactly what is going on, what the indicators are showing us, and how we discovered this in the first place. Step 2, collect data. So the next step that is required once you've defined the problem is to collect data. Now the reason for this step does actually vary depending on the problem that you've identified. Let's give you an example. If you have a team complaining that they have too much workload or their processes are not robust enough, you may need to find data to back this up. Now, this is coming from personal experience where I've had teams coming to me before saying there's too much workload, the processes are breaking down, there's massive issues within their ticketing system. And then you look into it and actually there's no particular problem. They've just had a slight increase in workload, but they can more than handle it. So often people will complain, but when you dive in, the actual problem can often be smaller. So do be mindful of that. If you can see something flagging up red right in front of you and you know it's a problem, and there's data right in front of you, fine. If it's something we have to start to investigate further to understand if it is a problem, you definitely need to collect some data around that. Data also helps you to back up your identified problem if you need to compile a business case for some funding or support to make bigger changes to fix the issue. So if you need to restructure the team, bring in new software, for example. So data is very important in getting buy-in from leaders and others in your team to say, yep, we can give you the time to work on this project because we know it's actually a problem. If you need to put together a business case, having this data to show, yes, there's an issue, the team is overworked or whatever the issue may be, that's very important at this stage. Data should show you that, yes, a problem exists, how long the problem has existed for, the impact of that problem, and how extensive that problem is. Once you have your data compiled, it is important that you present this in a graphical format so everyone can access this. By doing so, you get the buy-in early on in case you need to make a bigger change further down the line. Once you have collected that data and presented it, you've then completed step 2. So now we need to think about, when collecting the data, how are we going to present that data within our RCA document? So for this, again, be clear, concise, and to the point. You do not want to show extensive data sets, extensive tables with thousands of lines of Excel sheets. You just want to show clearly what is happening. So for our scenario, we can see clearly here the number of complaints by month. So we've stated in our document that over the past 12 months, we were consistently around 15. Our peak was around 19 in August, but it was generally consistent. We can now see in May a significant jump, a trebling of the average for that particular period of time. So therefore, the person reading that document, who you submit that to show that there's a problem, there's an issue, can see clearly there's something we need to address here. There's clearly a problem that shouldn't happen. for no reason. Now, of course, it could be the case that actually you've just improved your handling of complaints, and some of the agents that would never actually talk about the complaints, they've now left. New people have come on board. Those people are now talking about those complaints more openly. It could be that, and that's a good thing to know, because then you can actually start to deal with those complaints more. But it could also be the case that something fundamental has changed within your operation, within your service or your product that is making your customers unhappy. So again, every single time you want to show the reason for conducting a root cause analysis, you need to have data behind that. The data need to show clearly what you're saying. If there's a disconnect between what you're saying is happening and what the data is showing, if you're trying to get buy-in from a leader to help you conduct that root cause analysis, they're going to come back with questions, right? So make sure it's clear, it's linked, it's concise, it's showing exactly what you need it to show. Step 3, identify possible causes. So it is at this stage where the RCA actually really starts to begin. You'll often gather people, mainly those affected by the issue or issues, into a room to brainstorm the potential causes, discuss further the effects and the possible solution. So get people together in a room, start a brainstorming session, do a workshop to really understand from the team this RCA from their perspective. At this stage, you need to think about the possible causes. So to do this, you will need to use an RCA tool, and these can include FMEA, fishbone diagram, 5 whys, Pareto, drill down on issue and error log, all of which we'll cover later in this course. At this point, you need to identify firstly, what are the possible causes of this problem? You will brainstorm all possible causes, dividing these off into specific categories such as the environment, the system, the team, and then drill down further into these categories. The aim of this stage is to start to decipher which area the cause of the problem actually falls into, enabling further deep diving later on. So at this stage, you need to really put everything out on the table. Get your team involved, make sure that everyone is having their say on what they think the possible cause could be. Don't let them land on just one cause. They need to think about all possible causes because there could be something hidden. Once you have identified all those possible causes and start to kind of break those down into more problematic and more those causes that may be more likely to be the problem, you can then move on to your next step. So at this stage, you would have identified your possible causes, and you need to make sure that you enable that piece to go within your document, your RCA document. So how would you go about doing this? Well, we're going to talk in more detail later on about the kind of tools that you can use to conduct a root cause analysis. But for this section, we'll look at an example based on the scenario we're looking at. So this is a fishbone diagram. So this is one of many root cause analysis tools that you can use. But again, any tools you use, visual tools, written tools, again, make sure they show up within your RCA document. And again, the reason for this is to ensure those people looking at the document now or in the future, those people you're trying to get buy-in from, they can see how you came to your conclusions. They can see the thinking behind what you're actually saying. So we're going to cover off the fishbone diagram a bit more later on, but for now, let's briefly go over what we've got here. So as you can see on the right of your screen, we've got the problem statement. The number of customer complaints is 3 times the average for the past year in this current month. So we state clearly, what is our problem here? We then break that down into particular categories: measurement, materials, method, environment, people, and machine. And this is where we want to actually root cause. Root cause, not necessarily the actual reason for that, but the potential reasons. What are the potential causes of that particular problem statement? So we can look at some examples here. Measurement. The way in which customer complaints were defined has now changed. The threshold for customer complaints has recently changed. The SLAs around call handling and wait times have now been extended. If we look at method, the customer phone menu is confusing. There are too many numbers to call to choose from. Dedicated line for customer complaints could spur on additional complaints. People, the customer service has deteriorated. Agents are not knowledgeable about new products. The number of available agents have fallen. General fatigue across the wider team. So at this stage, you'll probably use this kind of tool within your group. So if you're working with a team, you'll all get into a room and you'll brainstorm. Everyone should think about potential causes of our problem statement. And at this stage, there's no right or wrong answer. Every answer or every possible idea should be on the table, even if it's incorrect. You can then later on kind of start to go further into those that are correct and those that aren't correct to look at them separately. So for your RCA document, make sure everything you do in terms of root cause analysis, in terms of those possible causes, is put down into that document. And if you're talking on the site to other people, if you're having interviews with people, if you're starting to survey people to understand a bit more what they think, if you're diving deeper into some of these particular ideas, which you can do, and we can discuss the 5 whys tool later on, again, add that information into this document so people can see clearly as you're working through this root cause analysis process, they can see how you've gone through stage by stage, and it makes it so much clearer for that person to understand how you got to those final conclusions. Step 4, identify the root causes. So at this stage, you continue to use your RCA tools, this time looking for the root cause itself. So now that you've largely homed in on a specific category for the cause, it's time to dive in deeper. You need to understand why the causal factor actually exists. Why has this established itself here? Make sure, if in a team brainstorming scenario, that the team do not jump to a specific conclusion. Walk the process and make sure that the tool is used effectively. You cannot leave the stage until you know exactly the real reason as to why the problem has occurred. So like the previous step, you need to really kind of dig down and understand any potential root causes, identify those root causes, spread them out, and actually start to say as a team, which one do we know it actually is? It's about identifying specifically what is the root cause of this problem. Once you've identified that root cause, and you can actually identify that 1 or 2 specific RCA, you then need to move forward to your next step. So of course, at this stage, you've identified your possible causes, and now you're diving deeper into identifying those actual causes. And again, we need to think about how we're going to incorporate this into our RCA document. And it's a similar picture to the last one. We want to incorporate any tools that we use or any write-ups that we use into our document so people can see exactly how we got to our conclusions. So on your screen is an example of what is known as a 5 whys diagram. We will cover this off later on in the course when going through our tools. But again, the way to use this is you can do a fishbone diagram, like in the previous section. You take one of those potential causes and you explore it further. So let's talk through it. So we define the problem. Customer service has deteriorated. That's one of the potential causes for that increase in complaints that somebody in your team has identified. So then you ask, why is this happening? Agents cannot answer a number of customer queries. Why is that? They are unable to address queries on the new product range. Why is that? They do not have the adequate knowledge and understanding of these new products. Why is that? They have not been trained or trained sufficiently on the new product range. Why is that? No official or structured training was given on the new product range. So the aim of this is to go as deep as possible into that. So it's 5 whys, you can do 3 whys, you can do 7 whys to understand exactly why that has actually happened. Once you've done that, you then talk about the action you can then take away from that particular tool. So here, immediately, all agents must be trained on the new product range. This should have an emphasis on the type of questions the contact center has already been receiving. Following this, a detailed new product range training schedule should be implemented by management to avoid any such issues going forward. So this clearly shows here how you've got from your potential problem to your final root cause, and then to an actual potential solution that you can deliver for that. You can deliver to solve this issue. So we're going to go into the 5 whys tool more later on. But again, anything you use at this stage, at step 4, when identifying your root causes, make sure those are also included into your root cause analysis document so people can see how you've come to those conclusions. So the 5th step in the process is where you start to identify your solutions. And as we touched on before, the great thing about root cause analysis is it's not just about showing you what is going wrong and why is it going wrong, but this enables you to see what potential solutions you can actually deploy. So once you've established the main causes of your issues and the root cause of these, you can then think through how you're going to fix these for the present and for the future, and focus on that point, right? It's the present. So how can we fix for this today? But also, how can we fix for these things for the longer term? You need to make sure that you're identifying solutions that fix this problem for the long term. Now, this is best done by speaking with the team directly impacted, as well as leaders, because leaders may need to stump up some cash here if the problem's a really big problem. Now, the ones in the team that are working on this directly impacted by this, these are the people that actually know what could actually be a decent solution. They're going to know the kind of things they could identify in terms of solutions. And leaders may be able to do the same thing as well. But with leaders, again, if it's a really big solution that needs to be deployed, it's a new software, for example, this could actually involve cost. And this will be done by dropping out of the RCA tool the main reasons why the issue occurred, and then as a team discussing the main ways in which this can be rectified. Right, so kind of pull out those main reasons, those main causes, and then discuss them as a team, brainstorm it as a team. What ways could we actually solve for this? Obviously, when thinking about this, try and think about a fix that is obviously cheap or free, if possible. Businesses love that. But if not, just try and think about which one do we know is going to really solve for this problem and solve for it for the long term. Now, those on the front line, those people actually running the process, they're usually best placed to know what solution to deliver. So make sure when you go into this, you don't have a top-down approach. So have leaders and management deciding on this. It's a bottom-up approach. You have those people working the process. They need to be involved in this process. So here, you need to ensure that the chosen solution, firstly, it can be tested, and it is tested. Secondly, it has universal support. So everyone in the room, in the brainstorming session, including leaders, they're all on board with this. Thirdly, it's a long-term fix, and it can be used to control this problem going forward. And fourthly, if needed, it has an owner who will check up on this solution once in a while to ensure it continues to be the best solution for this problem. Now, for me, I will always give a new process, a fixed or amended process, new controls or a solution, an owner. Someone should be responsible for this particular solution, right? That person needs to then feed back and say, yep, the solution's working for the long term. This is delivering. There's no issues. But they can also feed back and say, guys, we're starting to see some slippage here. The data is showing that actually we're getting a problem, right? So I would advise strongly that you give that particular solution an owner when you identify that solution. Now, please avoid here finding a fix, sticking it onto your particular problem, and then walking away. Without testing, identifying a sound control measure, and giving it an owner, you run the risk of repeat errors down the line. Right, so don't just say in that brainstorming session, right, guys, this is what we're going to do. Okay, you can go out now, put it into place for the next hour, done. Let's walk away, finished. Right? I've seen that happen so many times before, and that does not work. You need to follow the process through to the next step. So again, at this stage, you would have worked with your team to identify your potential solutions, but how are you going to write that up within your RCA document? So we want to try and ensure that all of those potential solutions are recorded so we can take them away in future and use them if needs be. So for this section, you want to state, firstly, the problem. Customer service has deteriorated because agents lack a knowledge of the new product ranges. This is because no formal or structured training was given to agents ahead of the product launches, right? So in our previous steps, we've identified that this is our root cause. This is the main thing that is causing us to have an increase in customer complaints. We have new product ranges, but we have staff that do not know about these particular product ranges. We then need to have a brainstorming session with the team where we brainstorm potential solutions, and then we need to choose what solutions we're going to follow on with. Now, when it comes to brainstorming, you may end up with 20, 30, 40 potential solutions. This is not about identifying at this stage exactly what you want to do, but it's about showing what are the potential solutions we can explore further. And again, all of these solutions should be included within your RCA document. So examples could include implement new product range training, test new starters for their knowledge, improve management culture, send out new product information to customers, have a new product line dedicated number, Q&A sessions between agents and new product team. right? So this is where you identify all the potential solutions that you could explore. And then from that, as a team, you identify which solutions you're going to take away. Implement new product range training, improve management culture, send out new product information to customers. So in that brainstorming session, you'll get all that information you need. You then choose your solutions. But again, it's really important that you make sure that all of that information is included within your RCA document so that people can take it away and see exactly how you came to your particular conclusions. So the sixth step in this process is to test your solutions. So once you've identified your chosen solutions, it is really important that you then test these before deploying them in full. Never should you deploy a solution without having some form of test beforehand to ensure that actually it's the right solution and it's not going to have a knock-on impact further down the line. So a pilot test is a situation where you test or trial your proposed solution on a limited scale, right? If your process is dealing with 10,000 bits of data a week, you don't necessarily have to test with 10,000 bits of data. You can test with maybe 50 or 100 bits of data. This is just a test to understand, will this actually work? And the reason for doing this is as follows. So you want to ensure that your chosen solution is actually the right solution, right? So when you're working with your team, you've identified maybe 10 solutions, you've said, okay, this is the right solution. It actually may not be the right solution in the end. So it may be the case you have to go back with the team and identify, okay, is there another solution that we can actually look to deploy? To ensure your chosen solution will work upon delivery. So again, you don't want to get to go live day one. We're going to start the process now, the new process. The fix is in place, the solution is there. It didn't work, right? No one wants that to happen because it looks bad for you and your team. So ensure that doesn't happen. To enable you to identify improvements to the solution before delivery. So it enables you to tweak and test and kind of understand, is there anything we can add into this to make it a better solution? And it's to increase the buy-in from stakeholders. Stakeholders are going to feel much more comfortable about you deploying that particular solution if they know you've tested that particular solution. So make sure you actually do that. So to run your pilot test, you need to do the following 6 steps. Firstly, identify the solutions that need deploying and add them to your pilot test grid. Secondly, discuss with the team what the best approach would be to pilot each one. Thirdly, you need to think about how you're going to pilot each solution, the scope of this pilot, for how long the testing will take place, and who is going to own that pilot. Fourth, to ensure your project does not drag on, you want to try and pilot all of your solutions either in tandem or within a week or so of each other. So when thinking about, okay, we want to deploy 10 solutions, we're going to try and pilot them in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's kind of how your thinking needs to be. If you say we're going to pilot 2 next week, 2 the following week, 2 the following week, you're looking at potentially 5, 6, 8, 10 weeks down the line, right? And the solution needs to be delivered quickly because that problem is still occurring. So try and ensure that all that testing is done pretty much in unison. Fifth, have someone record the results and outcome of each pilot at each time frame relevant to the project, so daily or weekly. So any information that comes out of that test to say, yep, this went right, this didn't go so right, we had 5 errors, 10 errors, make sure someone is recording all that information so then you can go back and use that to tweak or to tailor your solution. And lastly, when the pilot is finished, review what happened and make a decision on whether or not to continue on with that chosen solution, to amend the approach, or to identify a whole new approach. And we're going to look at how we build this out in the next section. So to test out your potential solutions and include this within your RCA document, you need to take 2 approaches to this. So firstly, we need to plan for and action the pilot testing of each solution. So at this stage, we need to build out a grid similar to the one on screen, where we look at our solutions, implement new product range training, improve management culture, send out new product information to customers. And then we need to think about the how. How are we going to test that particular solution? So for our first example, build a sample pack related to the new products. Test the agents on this based on similar questions received to ensure they have understood based on the training. So we're building out a sample pack. We're going to test agents and we're going to use the training to to understand have they actually grasped what is required of them in terms of their knowledge of these new products. So this is how you're going to test the actual solution, not how you're going to deploy the solution. You then need to think about your scope. So for our first solution, have this test training delivered to 25% of agents over a 1-week period, testing included. So if you have, say, 12 agents in your organization, we can say, right, for 3 of the agents, we're going to test them and we're going to give them this training over a 1-week period, right? So how many people do you want to be involved in this and how long is it going to take? That is what you look at for scope. How long is this testing going to take and how many people are going to be involved? You then need to give each task an owner. So for this example, we can say the contact center manager. And the person that owns the task is the person that needs to make sure that it's delivered as expected. They'll be the ones feeding back to the project manager or to the leadership team to say this is what's happened. They need to make sure the testing is complete and successful. The parameters for success, well, 80% of queries can be answered by the agent first time. So when it comes to testing those agents that you put in your scope, 80% of the queries that you give them, or more than 80% of those queries, need to be answered correctly first time. If that's the case, we can say that they're completed. The testing is done, it's successful piloting. If that is unable to be achieved, we can say that that has not passed the pilot testing. So again, for your RCA document, it's really about being clear and concise, right? This isn't super detailed, super intricate, a massive pilot plan involving lots and lots of complexity. This is really about being basic and saying, these are the key solutions we want to deliver, how we're going to deliver them, the scope in terms of time and people involved, who's owning this, and making sure that person that owns this knows that. And then what is the parameter for success? How can we tick off and say, yep, this has been a successful pilot? When you've done that, you then need to detail the results of your pilot test, right? We need to make sure it was complete and successful. So we again state our solutions. We then ask the question, was the test successful? And for this question, we can simply say to each one, yes, yes, yes. Now, of course, if it wasn't successful, we'd mark this off as no with a red cross to say this was not successful. Any amendments required? Well, again, at this stage, if the test was super successful and we know there's nothing else needed to be required, we can say there's none. However, even if the test was successful, it may be the case that you could say, actually, there is more we could do to make sure this solution is even more impactful. So if we're looking to improve management culture, we could say, expand the training to include other areas of management culture outside of new product launches, or send out new product information to customers, offer the information in several formats, video, email, right? So we can expand it out if we need to. If it's the case that the test was not successful, then you'd have to say, what are the amendments that are required to make this test actually successful? How can we actually say the solution is required if we amend something within that particular solution? You then want to look at the next steps. What comes next after we've delivered a successful test? So we need to build out the training in full, build out the full training program for that particular piece, and then build out templates, right? So whatever is necessary now to get the ball rolling on that particular solution. And as ever, give that particular solution an owner. So before, the owner obviously had to make sure the testing went well and it was delivered successfully. Now the owner needs to make sure that the solution is delivered in full. So the 7th step of this process is where you actually implement your chosen solutions. So once you've pilot tested your chosen solutions and you've identified your response to those pilots, so you've amended them, you've tweaked them, you've changed the approach, you then need to work out a plan for how you're going to implement your solutions in full. And this is where you start to build out your implementation plan, the plan for how you're going to implement your solutions. And this is where your pilot testing actually helps. You can now simply build on the approach that you took with your pilot testing. So obviously with pilot testing, you're using smaller samples, say maybe sort of 10 people as opposed to 100 people, or 50 lines of data as opposed to 1,000 lines of data. But now you can expand on that and just kind of build that out to cover off everything that you need to cover off for this particular solution. And that's the great thing about having a pilot test behind you. You can then build on what you've learned from that pilot test. So the purpose of the implementation plan is threefold. Firstly, is to ensure that everyone is aware of what is being implemented and when. You do not want people to come to you further down the line and say, this has changed, I was not aware this was happening, or can you please tell me when this is going to happen? You want to make sure that everyone is informed and aware at the right time. Secondly, it's to ensure that the timeframes identified are actually adhered to. So again, it makes sure that you can think about your plan, what needs to be developing, what needs deploying, and when does that need deploying by. It gives you time, that space, that scope to really think about what is your solution and how long are you going to need to actually deploy that. And thirdly, that the right approach is delivered for each solution. So again, as you're building out your plan, you've got that time, that scope to think about, is this the absolute right solution? Yes, it delivered for the pilot test, but is there something more we could do? Right? It gives you time to think about all these different things. So to build your implementation plan, there are 6 key steps you have to take, just as you did with the pilot test. Firstly, list out your chosen solutions on a grid. Secondly, identify how you're going to implement this. So you need to state clearly the action or course of action that will be taken to do this. And you need to be as detailed here as you need to be. So it can be the case that you can go into real detail around this as to how you're going to actually do this. Or if your leaders want 1 or 2 lines to be quite specific and succinct around what you're doing, that is fine. Again, this is what you need in terms of information. Thirdly, state the time frame in which the solution is implemented. So for quick wins, this may be a day. For others, it may be a few weeks, depending on the time needed to adjust this change. Fourth, identify who is going to own the implementation. So even if it's not the person who's personally deploying it, they will be responsible for ensuring it does in fact get deployed as it should. So remember, we need owners to all of these different things, to these process changes, to these documents, these plans. Everything needs an owner. Everyone should be held responsible for what is in their particular remit. Fifth, if there is a cost involved, state this, right? This is important from a budgetary control perspective. I have genuinely seen examples in the past of people delivering root cause analysis, saying, like, these are the solutions that we're going to implement, and then leadership being given a bill for around $50,000 for what solution was identified. And that conversation was not had, and leadership were completely taken aback, and obviously that was rejected straight away, right? So make sure you identify clearly how much it's going to cost. Often, the cost will be quite low, or anything or nothing. But make sure you're quite clear about what costs could be involved. You need to ensure that you have a smooth implementation to ensure that costs do not spiral. Your solution may be free initially, but if time drags on, you're starting to use people's time more and more, and you think, okay, we need a resource to come over and help us, then costs start to spiral. So make sure you're clear at this point on cost. Once you've done this, mark the activity as complete and let all key stakeholders know that this has been finished and that the solution is now live. So the implementation plan is only complete when all items are marked as finished. So as you're implementing your solutions, you need to make sure that you're also documenting this to show how you've planned for this, how the implementation is going, and how successful that implementation is. So within your RCA document, you can build out a grid similar to the one on screen that looks at the following. So again, detail your solution. So implement new product range training. Show how this is being implemented. Identify the key aspects of the new product range that customers will ask for. Build out the training plan and test it to ensure it covers off all aspects required. So again, we're just being quite concise here. We're not going into reels and reels of detail, loads and loads of text around what it actually is you need to do, how into detail. It's being specific, right? The person reading this document, if it's a leader, if it's someone that's looking back, they want to know exactly what are you going to do or what did you do? Very concise. So you need to give it a start and an end date. So how long is this particular implementation going to take? So in this case, 2 weeks. As ever, give this an owner. Make sure there's somebody that is owning the task of implementing that particular solution. If there's a cost, ensure you put that cost down. Now, often when it comes to root cause analysis, it can be the case that, in my experience, 95+% of the time, there is not really a cost involved. And that is because it may be a small issue, an error, but it can be fixed through changing something to do with management culture, people within the team, training, a process issue, maybe a software problem that can be fixed by a software team. It may not require something bigger. 5% of the time, I would say they may require some kind of budget, but generally not. If it requires some form of budget, you would then have to go around building out a business case to get approval and buy-in for that. And again, when you've worked through that, mark it off as complete. And you continue to do this for all of your solutions to make sure that it's clear exactly what is going to happen and then that it has actually happened at the end. So when you build this out, this document, make it a live document, make sure you're showing what's happening. Of course, if you need to make any amendments to dates or to owners, make sure that's up to date as it needs to be. And then, of course, mark it out as complete when it's complete. Step 6, monitor controls. So as we mentioned in step 5, building in the right controls is crucial at this stage. These will help us to ensure we do not get repeat issues with this particular process or product in the future. Often people put those controls in place and they can often be the right controls, but then they walk away from them. They don't check on them. They don't update them if things change or if we need to utilize data from them. We just walk away and never go back. Now, this is troubling because, as we all know, things such as processes, products, teams, departments, operations, organizations, they're always changing all the time. Therefore, why would these controls necessarily be the right ones all the time throughout all that change? If you bring in a new software or system, will that control or that solution you put in place still be applicable? You need to make sure that any controls or solutions you put in place are documented, are visual, are on those process maps, or in your work instructions, and they're given an owner to make sure they are looked after. By identifying an owner, this will ensure a regular check on the performance of the process. That owner should be reviewing the data if it exists to ensure that the control remains stable. Good control measures should show data. They'll have to keep an eye on the wider process to see if any of those KPIs or SLAs are being missed or are showing signs of strain so we can get ahead of a repeat issue. To monitor these, you can draft up a control document to review in team meetings or keep leaders posted on how these are holding out. When we build in these controls, and we've said this several times before now, it's so important we do not just walk away. If you leave that team or that organization, ensure you have a detailed handover. Make sure that those controls and solutions are handed over to the person coming after you. It's really important that we show these controls are working. Talk about it in team meetings, talk about it with your leaders, make sure they can see what's been put in place and continue to monitor them. So we could say that actually one of the key parts of the RCA document is this final part, and that's ensuring that you've built out a detailed control plan to show exactly how you're going to monitor those controls. You need to identify the controls, you need to build those controls, and then you need to monitor those controls for the long term. We need to make sure at this stage that those issues that plagued us in the past do not come up again in the future. And again, at this stage, keep it simple. You may have a completely separate control plan for your project or process or root cause analysis, depending on how big the issue is. But at this stage within this document, we want to know what is the item we're looking to control. So this could be your solution, or it could be an aspect of that solution, something to do with the process or product. The control measure we're going to use to actually control that problem. The metric we're going to use to actually identify, okay, this is where it needs to stay. If it moves out of this, we've got an issue. And of course, the owner to keep an eye on this. So item to control, new product range training material. So we know that we need to identify new product ranges. We need to build out training material for that. We need to ensure that new product range training material is built every time and it's up to date. The control measure here, checklist to confirm all agents have completed the training, checklist to confirm all new products have training materials available. So going forward, every time you have a new product, you need to ensure that everything has a checklist attached to that to say, has the training been completed? Has it been built in the first place? Is it available? This enables you then to check that off. So you've built that into that new product range process. The metric here is that the checklist is to confirm that 100% of all new products have training material available and 100% of agents have completed their training ahead of the launch. So before you can launch that new product, each checklist needs to have 100% complete to show, yes, there's training available and yes, the training has been completed. Now, of course, to do this, you can have someone like a manager do this, HR do this, or you can have a technical team or a bot, right? You could have an automated solution to do this. So if it's a checklist, they go in, they complete the training, the bot checks, has the training been completed, has the training been built, is that plan there? They can check that off. Equally, HR can do the same thing. So at this stage, again, work through each piece to make sure that everything has been identified and make sure that you can show clearly what exactly is it we're controlling. Don't be vague about that item that you're controlling. Be very specific about what it is you're controlling. Make sure you're being very specific about how you're controlling that, the metric you're going to use to measure that, and then who is owning that. When it comes to the owners of all these pieces, they must be held accountable to ensure this is successful. On many, many occasions, I've worked in root cause analysis projects or just one-off RCAs. The owners of those tasks, if they're not clearly identified or if their responsibility is not highlighted clearly to them, those root cause analyses fail because those people do not go away and implement the right solutions, they do not monitor what's happening with the testing, and they do not put in the right controls at the end to actually see, are things changing, are things getting better or worse? So you need to make sure your owners know exactly what is their responsibility within that particular piece of the RCA process. So in the next section, we are going to look at the tools that you need to use to conduct an RCA. Now for this course, we're going to look at 6 tools, but of course there are always more you can use if needs be. So we're going to look at the Pareto chart, the 5 whys, the fishbone diagram, the drill down, the FMEA, and the issue and error log. So in the next section, we're going to break down each tool and discuss further. So the first tool we're going to explore for the root cause analysis toolkit is the Pareto chart. So the Pareto principle states that 80% of the results are determined by 20% of the causes. This basically means in root cause analysis, identifying 20% of defect types that are causing 80% of all defects. So for example, if you had 10 defect types, or 10 potential causes, which is another way of saying it, but 10 potential causes, we are saying with the Pareto principle that 2 of those causes are causing 80% of all of our issues. It's basically a way of saying that there are a few key issues that are causing the majority of the problems. And that is the Pareto principle. Now, it's not always the case that is true. It can sometimes be there are many different things going wrong that you need to fix. But often it is the case that when you start to deep dive into your data, you can see actually there are 1 or 2 key things that are causing the vast majority of your errors. Now, a Pareto chart is a visual demonstration of this, and it acts as a good starting point to identify all causes and effects in an easy to read way. It's very visual. It's all about the statistical identification and graphical proof of what is going wrong in your particular process. And this is a good starting point to help us break down those bigger causes using other tools further down the line. So if we identify, okay, these are our 2 or 3 big causes, we know at this stage, all those other potential causes, we can place them to one side. We don't need to explore them further. We've got our 2 or big ones in hand. So a Pareto will be used by the following. So firstly, get your data. Pull together all of the data required to investigate this problem. Now, this data will need to show the frequency of the issues and causes. So how frequently are those things happening? Secondly, put this into a Pareto. Create your Pareto using the data that you've gathered. So a bar chart mixed with a line chart should appear, and you make sure to stack it so the biggest causes can be seen clearly. Now, again, as part of this course, there is a resource attached to this particular video to make sure that you can do that already. And we're going to explore that particular tool in more detail in the next section. Finally, identify the 80%. See which causes, often the top 2 or 3, are causing 80% of the issues. You can then take these away with you for that further investigation. Okay, they're the ones you need to focus on, not the others. Focus on those particular ones. Now, often with the Pareto, you may not get 80% of your issues covered at the end. It could fall at around 60%, and that's absolutely fine, right? That's a really good start. You've got 60% of all causes identified really, really quickly, and there's 2 or 3. You can start working on those. If you can reduce your issues by over half, that's a really great start. So don't worry about making it 80%, just make it as big as possible. So let's look at a demonstration of how we would build a Pareto chart. So here we can see a Pareto chart, right? A Pareto chart that hasn't been filled yet. It's just a basic Pareto chart as we can get on any statistical software like Excel. So we want to identify the errors that are happening within our contact center as per our scenario example. So to do this, we want to identify the defect type or the particular complaint in terms of our example, and the number of times that's happened. So how many complaints are we getting per issue? So we know there are different types of complaints, right? So let's take 8 examples. So we could say they're complaining about wait time, handle time, lack of knowledge, late arrival, that could be late arrival of product, the customer menu, so when they dial in, the agent attitude they're not happy with, faulty product, and then incorrect advice. Okay, so with this here we can see, right, we've got our 8 particular types of complaint, or it'll be whatever it is for your particular project. And then we need to populate how many times, right? So this is where we start to build our Pareto. How many times are these occurring? So if we look at the information for the past couple of months, we know we had 3 complaints on wait time, 1 complaint on handle time, 42 complaints on the lack of knowledge, no complaints on late arrival. And already you can see, right, which ones are starting to stand out as those bigger potential causes. Customer menu, we had 38 complaints on the customer menu. Agent attitude, 11. Faulty product, 2. And incorrect advice, 3. So as you can see from the Pareto, the bars are representing those figures, right? The actual numbers here. So the actual numbers we've got here, the data we have. And we have here our cumulative Pareto line. And it grows over time to show how much percentage this is actually representing. So if you think about the Pareto principle, obviously is 80% be here, right? And we're saying 20% of causes lead to 80% of issues. Well, we've got over 80% of our complaints identified in these 2, right? Because we've got over the 80% mark, we can see that over 80% of all complaints were because of these 2 particular things. So we can see lack of knowledge and customer menu are those 2 things that are the biggest issue for us, and we need to explore them further. So we haven't necessarily root caused the actual why here, right? We can just see, we know exactly where we need to start looking further. We need to understand what is this lack of knowledge and why is this happening? What is this customer menu problem and why is that occurring? And that's the great thing about the Pareto tool. It's a starting point, right? It gives you that basic information at the start to show you, okay, this is what's happening. These are the key areas you need to look at. We've already done some root cause analysis because we can see, right, lack of knowledge and customer menu, they're the key things. But we know we can go much, much further and use the other tools to understand why that is the case. So remember, the great thing about a Pareto is that visual demonstration at the start, and it enables you to say, right, the other 6 potential complaints, we don't need to look at those. They're very small in comparison to this bigger complaint. We need to focus on these other complaints first to start to understand how we can reduce those complaints. So the next tool to look at is the 5 whys tool. Now, the 5 whys technique is an extremely simple tool that can be used to move you from understanding symptoms to causes in a relatively quick time. So if you have an issue or problem and you don't have a lot of time to invest in this. You don't have weeks or months to invest. You need to know something very quickly. The 5 whys approach is probably going to be the best approach for you. You can understand your cause and potential solution relatively quickly. Now, it should be used when trying to understand 1 or 2 simple issues. The more issues and the more complex these issues, the less useful the 5 whys tool will be. There are other tools out there that can deal with those kind of issues better. Now, there is a process to follow to ensure the best results when it comes to this particular technique, and there are 6 steps that you should look to follow. Firstly, get the team together. One of the great things about the 5 whys tool is it really is a team effort. You can do a 5 whys diagram on your own if you want to, brainstorm quickly, but it's really good to make sure the team that are actually affected by this particular issue are involved, and the 5 whys enables people to come around a particular tool to identify the issue. So obviously, when you're running a session like this, you need to make sure that the session is well facilitated. So this could be yourself or someone else who knows how to facilitate a session to make sure people are focused on the problem at hand. Then you want to identify the problem. So you want to have the team highlight exactly what the problem is and then write down that problem at the top of the 5 whys diagram. Make sure it's front and center so everyone knows exactly what it is you're actually looking to understand further. Then ask why. Once the problem is out there, ask the team, why did this happen? Ask why again, and again, and again. After answering your first why, keep asking the team, so why did that happen? And so why did that happen? And so on. And you should aim for at least 5 whys, but sometimes it can be more than 5, sometimes it can be less than 5. It depends really on the kind of solution, right? If it's a really big issue and complex issue, you could end up going down 20, 30 whys, which is why we try and avoid the 5 whys for those really big complex issues. If it's smaller and the issue or the actual cause is quite apparent, you can probably get to that in about 3 whys. But keep asking why. So why did that happen? So why did that happen? And why did that happen? Right? Keep diving down as far as you possibly can go. You then want to identify the root cause. So once the team are at the point where you can no longer ask them why, you should have reached your root cause. Now address this to understand why this happened, right? They'll come to a point where you ask so many whys, they say, there literally is no further we can go with this. This is literally the why. That is your root cause. You then want to identify and monitor your solutions. So the great thing about the 5 whys diagram is at the end, not only do you identify the cause, but there's space for you to identify a solution. So have the team brainstorm potential ways to stop this issue from recurring in the future. If possible, identify an owner who's going to monitor this going forward. So again, the great thing about the 5 whys is not only can you identify the cause, but a potential solution as well. This is why you don't want to use 5 whys for a really big substantial problem, because you don't want to solve for that substantial problem in that same session. You might need to take that away, get buy-in from leaders, build a business case. But for those smaller issues, those more day-to-day issues, you can do that within that session. So now let's look at a demonstration of a 5 whys diagram in action. Now we're going to use our scenario as we have done throughout this course. And this is what a 5 whys diagram looks like. So as you can see at the top, we want to define the problem, right? What is the problem we're actually looking at? And then we go down step by step to ask, why is this happening? Why? And we keep asking that until we can get to a point where we can no longer ask that. And then we have to identify what action can actually be taken at this point. So let's go through our example. So define the problem. Customer service has deteriorated. So why is this happening? Agents cannot answer a number of customer queries. Why is that? They are unable to address queries on the new product range. So why is that? They do not have the adequate knowledge and understanding of these new products. Why is that? They have not been trained or trained sufficiently on the new product range. Why is that? No official or structured training was given on the new product range. So at this point, the team feel it's comfortable to stop, right? Customer service has deteriorated because people don't know what they should know about those particular products. We know there's a direct impact there, right? Customers are complaining about the current service, and that's because of new products. The new product range, there's a lack of information. Therefore, if there's no training, and we've identified there's no structured training, We know that's something that can be put in place to reduce those errors. Now, of course, at this stage, if you wanted to, you could go further and further, but you have to make a decision here. You need to identify what is going to solve for this problem, right? What is that cause? If your agents don't have the information or the knowledge to hand, and that's causing your customer complaints to increase, and you've identified there's no training, this is your main root cause. This is what you're going to need to solve for. So at this stage, you can then identify actions that can be taken. So immediately, all agents must be trained on the new product range. This should have an emphasis on the type of questions the contact center has already been receiving. So you're identifying an immediate solution. What can we do to stop the bleeding right now? What can we do to reduce those errors right now? Following this, a detailed new product range training schedule should be implemented by management to avoid any such issues going forward. So you're then identifying a longer term solution, right? So the great thing about the 5 whys is that we have this solution in here. Often it will be the case that we just want that immediate solution. What can we do? What can we take away today? If it's a longer term solution, you may take that into a project to do some pilot testing and some testing on that particular solution. But at this stage, it's really about identifying what can we do right now to fix for this problem today. So the next tool we're going to explore is the fishbone diagram. So the fishbone diagram is a great option for brainstorming the different potential categories in which the issue could occur. So this could include machinery, people, environments. Now the fishbone diagram does generally have a specific number of categories, and these categories often fall to a specific area. So environment comes up quite a lot, method does, machinery does. But again, if you need to tailor them to your project or your root cause issue, that's absolutely fine. This tool enables you to identify the root cause of your issue, understand if there are any bottlenecks in your process, and understand why something isn't working right. So it's a great tool to give us more information than other tools particularly give us. So to use this tool, you need to do the following. Firstly, as with many of these tools, right, write down your problem. State clearly what your problem is. This will be simple statements such as the following. Jane is processing 50% less tickets than her counterparts. It's simple, it's straightforward. We now need to look into that. Why is she processing 50% less tickets than her counterparts? It needs to be clear and concise and not too detailed as to what the problem is. This enables the team then to rally around that particular problem statement, and then we can start to brainstorm from that. Then think about the categories. So these will cover off the major factors that could be causing the problem, such as the location, the software, the environment, etc. You then want to break your categories down. So this is when you actually start to do your actual root cause analysis. Here, you need to think about possible causes related to each category. So of course, for a fishbone diagram, have a team event again, have a workshop, get everyone together and have the team brainstorm the potential causes by category. So you can go category by category, you can have the categories on the board and they can just start putting their ideas up depending on whichever category they want to start looking at first. It depends again on what the team actually wants to do. But make sure that categories are dealt with as much as they possibly could be. You then want to analyze your diagram. So at this stage, the diagram should be complete for all options considered. Now it is time to see which are the most feasible causes. Right? So as a team, start to talk through the diagram, talk through what's come out of the diagram, talk through the potential cause on the screen or on the wall, and start to see which ones are the most feasible causes of that particular issue. You then want to investigate them further. So now you've identified the most feasible causes, you must start looking into each one to understand whether or not that option is the main cause. Now, of course, if you've identified 30, 40, 50 potential causes, they're not all going to be causes of that particular issue. Or if they are, they're going to have very different impacts. Some might have very, very small impact, some much bigger. We want to target those things that have the biggest impact. So when doing your fishbone diagram, make sure you work with the team, you have that honest, open, upfront dialogue with the team around what is actually happening and what those potential causes could be, but make sure you do go off and investigate those further. So now let's look then at a demonstration of a fishbone diagram in action. So as like before, we're going to use a scenario that we're going through in this course. And as you can see from the diagram itself, it is literally shaped like a fish, right? So you have the head and then you have the skeleton of the fish. So we have at the top here, to the right, we have our problem statement. The head is the problem statement. This is where you need to detail in that one-liner what actually is happening. What is the problem we're looking at? And then the way that the diagram works is you kind of work backwards. What is beneath that? What is leading to that problem statement? What is causing that problem statement? So you can see here how we've broken it down into our categories. So measurement, materials, method, machine, people, and environment. And these are the key categories that are often used when it comes to a fishbone diagram. But again, if you want to tailor them and change them, you can do. If there are some that are completely irrelevant to your particular problem, you can just remove them if you need to. You do not always have to have 6. You can have some more if needs be, or less, but generally 6 is kind of what you'd expect because that's the number of categories you can kind of break it down. The categories on screen generally cover everything off. So the first thing you need to do is add in your problem statement. So the number of customer complaints is 3 times the average for the past year in this current month. So we can see clearly at the start, this is the problem we are looking to root cause, right? It keeps people's minds focused on this is the issue. Now you can do your fishbone diagram in 2 ways. Either you can say to everyone, right, let's go category by category. So firstly, measurement. Let's look at measurement as one, and let's put all of those into measurement if you want to. Now, I often don't go that route. I would prefer people to kind of have their ideas. They think, okay, this is the potential cause I've identified, and then try and find a category for that to fall into. Because often, if you sit and you go through all of one category at once, you'll end up having to come back anyway and add further down the line. So you might as well go about it like this. Just kind of plot them on as and when you need to, depending on what has come up. Now, you don't need to cover off the equal amount per category, right? So in this example, we've got 5 per category. Sometimes you might have 1 or 2 per category. Other times you might have 5 or 6. If you have an example of 5 or 6 in one category and say 2 in another category, if you can pad that other category out, that's great. But again, don't put things on the board just for the sake of it. Try and get all of those authentic, real ideas up on the board and as best as possible. So let's look through some of the examples we've got on screen here to kind of see the ideas of what you could actually start to put on here as potential root causes. So if we look at measurement, the way in which customer complaints were defined has now changed. So we're saying the number of customer complaints is on the increase. And a potential cause of that is because the way in which we define customer complaints has now actually changed. So we're saying the way we measure customer complaints could be leading to that increase. The threshold for customer complaints has recently changed. The SLAs around call handling and wait time have been extended. So on this occasion, we're saying, is there something about the way in which we measure our complaints that is actually causing that to increase? This would indicate actually there isn't a problem overall, it's just a change in the way in which we're measuring that. If we look at people, customer service has deteriorated, right? Quite a broad statement. We need to go further into that. Agents are not knowledgeable about new products. The number of available agents has fallen. There's a general fatigue across the wider team. Management are not living up to the required standards. Right? These are really starting to pinpoint potential reasons as to why that's the case. Now, with this example, we know the key thing here is that agents are not knowledgeable about new products. And that's one of those causes that we can take away in the future and start a solution for. But it's about really identifying all the different avenues, right? We've got management on there. We've got fatigue. We've got the reduction in the number of staff. We've got new products. We've got customer service. What can we put on there to really show that we've thought about every potential cause? Now, a number of these causes may be completely irrelevant, right? But it's just saying, get them on the board. Let's have a general discussion about them. Some of them we'll take away with us for future to start to root cause them further. Others we will actually we'll put to one side, and others could actually be our potential causes for this particular problem. And that's the great thing about the fishbone diagram. We can really get all ideas on the board for us to discuss further. So once all those ideas are on the board, as a team, start to go through them, start to discuss them more detail, and identify those ones you're going to take away to explore further. those you're going to park as not necessary, and those that you can only take away for another day to solve for other issues. So the next tool we're going to explore in more detail is the drill down. So this technique breaks the identified problem down into its basic elements. And the aim here is to identify whether the cause was human, physical, or organizational. But of course, you can add on newer categories such as technological, data, etc. Right? So this is about breaking down the problem. We want to break it down to its basic elements. Problems are not one single entity. We need to break it down to those various different entities that can occur with the problem and drill down to understand the actual problem and the cause. And can we categorize that cause? Can we categorize that cause as being human, physical, or organizational? So this is done by following the next 6 steps. Firstly, as with most of these tools, assemble the team. Get the team affected by this problem into a room and get them brainstorming. Again, write down the problem. Make sure that problem is front and center on the top of a board so people know exactly what problem they are looking to drill down. You can write a summary of the problem with this, highlighting the key components if this helps. So next you then need to start to break down the problem into smaller and smaller components, and those components that actually make up the problem. So as we said before, a problem isn't just a single entity, right? There are a number of reasons that could be leading to that problem and that make that problem up. So you need to, as a team, walk through the building blocks that make that up. So here you're identifying a number of causes from big to small, and these can be taken away and worked on individually later on. So as you drill down into that problem, you can start to see the different causes, the different problems that make up that problem. It's about breaking it down as far as possible. And of course, we'll see in the demonstration how to actually do that. You want to land on the main cause, the main reason this whole issue started in the first place. And this is the piece that you need to take away and fix as your root cause. So you can then identify what is the root cause, what has caused this issue in the first place, and then you can categorize it to say, right, is it human, physical, organizational, or something else? And then you can go away and actually tackle that. Now, the benefit of identifying the cause in terms of a category means we can start to see over time, if we had, say, 100 issues identified, 100 drill downs we did over the past year, how many of those were human? How many were physical? How many were organizational, right? Do we have a problem with our teams? Do we have a problem with the structure, the physical structure of our organization? This enables us to look at those things in more detail. And that's the benefit of being able to categorize through the drill down. So now let's look at a demonstration of a drill down in action. So to start off your drill down, again, just build out a simple template such as the one on screen with that upside down triangle shape. So you can really see this is how we're going to go down and down and down into that central point at the bottom. Say to the top, the key issue, customer complaints for the contact center now at 45. Complaints are highest around customer service, right? So our problem is we have 45 complaints on average now a month based on the last month. But this is not the sole problem. Complaints are highest around customer service. Okay, so we're getting a bit more information here now. It's not just the fact that we're getting customer complaints at 45, we're actually getting it more around customer service, right? It's adding more information on to that particular problem. New products have been launched in recent months. So again, we can see there's another aspect here, right? We're trying to understand, why is this happening? What is this increase in customer complaints coming from? Well, we're seeing that new products have been launched in recent months. We can see that team members are now saying they lack new product knowledge. The investment in the training is not there. So you can see as you're kind of working through this, my main problem is customer complaints for the new contact center are at 45. As I start to drill down into that, I can see, hang on a second, they're highest around customer service. So I need to go and talk to people and talk to the customer service department to understand why. What has changed recently? Well, new products have been launched. That's one thing that's changed. Okay, let me explore that further. So I drill down further into the new products being launched. Oh, okay, I can see that team members are lacking that knowledge. They're telling me they're getting complaints because they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so what about the training? Oh, okay, I can see there's no investment in the training. So as you have those conversations and kind of work through that process, whether you physically go and see the process in action or you do it with your team in a brainstorming session, you work through that process and you can see these are the building blocks that make up your problem. You can then land on your actual root cause. Team members not trained on new products. This enables you to see the actual problem here is within that particular root cause. And so you have to then identify, is it human, physical, organizational? And again, at this point, it could be tricky, right? So it could be human because humans don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the new products. But actually, I would categorize this as organizational. We have a problem within the organization because we haven't got structured training. We knew new products were coming on board. We knew the go live dates for these new products, but we didn't build out structured training. Therefore, it's an organizational issue. You can't blame the agents or the call center operatives. They weren't informed of this, right? So we identify there's an organizational issue and we can take that away to explore further. So the next tool we're going to look at is the FMEA. Now, the FMEA stands for Failure, Modes, Effects, Analysis. So it sounds quite different to what we've explored so far, but actually it's pretty similar. The word failure here basically means error or issue. This is the thing that's gone wrong. This is that issue, that problem we're facing here, the failure. The modes can also be referred to as causes. So the mode is the way in which it has gone wrong. The effects, obviously, is the effect that issue has caused, and the analysis is what you have to do next to identify what's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong, and the controls you'll put in place to fix that. So the FMEA is a qualitative and systematic tool used for two main purposes. Firstly, to identify possible causes of failures currently occurring. So why is that thing failing? Why is that occurring? Right? This is where the question of why comes into play. Secondly, it's also used to help you to anticipate what could go wrong in a process or product. So many people actually use FMEAs when they're trying to build out a new process or build out a new product, and they build out an FMEA to see, okay, what could actually go wrong in this? So not what has gone wrong, not what do we need to root cause, but what could potentially go wrong. So it can be used on both sides. Now, for the sake of this course, we'll be focusing on the first use because that is regarding root cause analysis. And the way to use FMEA here is to do the following. Firstly, as with most of these tools, gather the team. Bring the main team members affected by this issue into a room because we're going to brainstorm. Next, identify the process. So establish exactly what process, or often with FMEAs, processes, are being discussed here and write those down. Next, we want to break it down. We want to identify the various ways in which the process has been or can go wrong in the future. So how is this process going wrong? What is it specifically about this process that is going wrong? With an FMEA, as you'll see during the demonstration, it's broken down into a really big grid, and these grids can go on literally for hundreds and hundreds of lines. So if you're looking at a process step, you can often break this down into 20, 30 different ways in which it's going wrong, right? We want to identify every single way it's going wrong. Now, often you get these ideas that will come from your fishbone diagram, right? We've got all these different potential causes. You can bring a lot of those into this if you need to. You then want to think about the effects. So detail what impact each of the failures has had. So what is the effect of each one of these failures? So again, this is where we're going into more detail. We've talked about the potential causes in the other tools, but what could the effects be of these? You then can identify the cause. So what are the main possible potential causes of the one failure? Now, detail as many as you possibly can. Even if it's not correct, it could affect it in the future, right? So these are the potential causes. If it's not happening right now, it could potentially be a cause in the future. You then want to identify the current controls. So are the controls currently in place? Are there controls and are they currently working? If they exist, write them down. You then want to identify actions. Highlight steps that are needed to be taken to fix the potential errors and to stop them from reoccurring in the future. This will be the action taken plus any new control measure identified. So again, with this tool, we're getting to those solutions, to those controls. We can use this tool to identify not just what's going wrong, why it's going wrong, but also what we can do to fix that. And then, of course, implement. Implement those controls and solutions to fix and avoid your potential failures. So note, FMEAs can go on for a very long time, and I've seen some of these go on into hundreds and hundreds of lines. So make sure you're aware of the potential for this to happen. But again, when you're thinking about what tool to particularly use, try and think about, if you know it's going to end up going into hundreds and hundreds of lines, is FMEA the right tool for you? If you have the time to do that, that's absolutely fine. But of course, if you want to, you can kind of stop at a certain level. It depends on what's best, again, for the team. So now let's look at a demonstration of an FMEA in action. So here we have an FMEA grid, and you can see we have a number of headers across the top and a number of figures that we need to fill out. So we're going to go through each one using an example as based on our scenario with this course. So firstly, we need to identify a process step to look at. So what is the process step under investigation? Well, looking at what's come out of our fishbone diagram and the discussions we've had with the team, we know that there's an issue with the new product process. So that is the first process we can actually start to look at. Now, you can go down into individual steps if you want to, but at this stage, we don't really know what's actually going wrong in that particular process, so we can leave it just as the process. Then we need to identify the potential failure mode. So what about this key input can actually go wrong? Well, we know that agents are not informed of a new product launch. This is one way in which that process is failing, right? It's not delivering what it should do. We'd expect as part of the new product process, agents are informed about this new product. We then want to think about the potential failure effects. So what is the impact on key output variables? Well, we know customer complaints rise, right? Some of the key variables that we'll have with our products is the impact on the customer. What does the customer think about it? How do they see it? If customer complaints are rising, this is a really big impact. And obviously, agents not being informed is leading to an impact on the customer. So then we have to do something along the lines of what's known as severity, occurrence, and detection. And this is a scoring system that we need to investigate slightly further. So as you can see from your screen, there's a way in which we have to look at severity, occurrence, and detection. So with severity ranking encompasses what is important to the industry, company, or customers. So safety standards, environment, legal, production continuity, etc., etc. Now, a low number means that it has a low impact. A high number, a high impact. So when we've identified what we've identified, and we go back to the FMEA, if we're looking at severity, how severe is this problem? How severe is this issue in hand? If we're looking at occurrence, we then need to rank the probability of a failure occurring during that lifetime of a product. So how likely is it that this particular issue or error or failure is going to occur? And then detection. What is the probability of that problem being detected and being acted upon before it's happened? So if we have a low number, it's very likely to be detected. If you have a high number, it's not likely to be detected at all. So we need to think about, when it comes to the FMEA, what is the severity of that problem? How often does it occur? And how likely is it to be detected? And through that, we can come up with our RPN number, which we'll look at again on the next slide. So for our example here, we could say severity, we could rank it at, say, 8, right? We know customer complaints are going up. This is going to cause a big issue for us because obviously if customer complaints go up, we could end up losing customers and losing a customer base, which reduces sales. So actually the severity here is quite high. And so here we have to think about the potential causes. So what causes the key inputs here to go wrong? Well, we know that a lack of new product information is available to agents. Right, so that's the reason why this is going wrong, because there's a lack of information on the new products available to our agents. So we have to think about occurrence. How often is this occurring? Well, complaints are going up a lot more than they should do, but they're not currently at alarming levels. So we could put that as a 5. Current controls. What are the existing controls in place? We could say account managers inform teams of new products coming downstream. So that's one thing that is happening currently. But again, it's not a control that's working effectively enough because not everyone's being told. So how easy is this to detect? Obviously, the lower, the more likely to be detected, the higher, the less likely to be detected. Well, we've detected it, right? Customer complaints are going up. We have detected this. We've detected this as an issue and a problem that's occurring. So we could probably put that down as a 3. And we can see here severity times occurrence times detection gives us our RPN number. Now, the RPN number is something that we're going to use after putting in 10, 15 different ideas down here. And then we can filter it and say, okay, which one is the biggest issue? If we had 120, 10, 15, 35, 220, 220 is the one with the biggest impact. Therefore, that's the one we need to focus on. So the one with the highest RPN number, or those failure modes with the highest RPN numbers, they're the ones we need to really focus on. If we have a group that are really low, they're not as much of a priority as others. So once you've done that, you then need to think about your actions. What are the actions to the reduction of the occurrence of the cause, or how can we improve the detection of it? So the detection for us is quite good here. We have the customer complaints rising. We do have our managers, they know, our staff start to raise the issues. So we have quite a good way of detecting it. So what can we do here to fix this potentially happening in the future? So we could say, inform all teams in the process of new product launches, right? So it's part of their process is that everyone must be informed of a new product launch and who would be responsible for that. So again, the idea of responsibility comes into even to the FMEA. It's a really important thing to remember. Having someone responsible is extremely important. So we could say the contact center line managers are responsible for this. They need to be responsible for this to make sure that this happens, that everyone in that process is informed. That will be built into something. So what actions have been completed? Well, we could say the recommended action has been built in to the new product launch checklist. Right, so we have a checklist there to make sure has everything been done when a new product launches. We can build this into that checklist to make sure that everyone is informed when a new product goes live. So as you can see, this has been in stages, right? So we have here, this section here is kind of that root cause analysis section. Here we have the problem, the failure, what is going wrong, the actual score around that, the causes, that kind of thing, right? The effects. This is kind of that root cause piece. And often it will be the case that this is the first section you'll complete, right? You might complete all of this separately. The next section you may complete then is think about actions, right? What are the actions we need to think about? This is where we start to do our solutioning, our solutions. The final piece is when you think about the controls. What has actually happened, right? So you can't complete all this at once because if you just identified a solution, you can't then say it's been implemented. So often this section will be done last to say what has actually happened, what controls were actually put in place after all. So here again, you have to think about your severity, occurrence, and detection. But this is once your controls and your solutions have been deployed and you've got some data in your hand, what has actually happened? So we could say our severity remains at 8 because if it happens, it's a severe issue. Our severity does not change. Our occurrence last time was 5, but we could say now, because we've got this checklist, because we've got this built in there, our occurrence has gone down significantly. We could put that at a 2. And detection, because we have the checklist, because we have the contact center line managers in control here, we can place that as 1. So you can see here how you get a big jump down from 120 to 16. So the great thing here about the FMEA is it shows you visually the change that can happen just by making those small changes within your process, right? Just by adding 1 extra line into that checklist, we can reduce the potential of this problem happening again in the future. So it can have a big impact. Obviously, you'll build out this much more, so you'll end up having dozens of lines and you'll see all of these different things changing. Remember to filter by the RPN, the biggest come top, obviously the smallest at the bottom, and then show and celebrate this, right? As you start to work through this and start to see these numbers go down, start to celebrate those wins and show people this is the impact, this is what's happened by us delivering this FMEA. And make sure you're delivering it in those right sections. First section, second section, and of course, then delivering on the controls. Make sure you update all of those sections, including those last parts, right? So when you've delivered your solution, don't just walk away. Make sure you deliver those controls, you monitor those controls, and you show, okay, this was the RPN number, this is where we're at now. That's a really powerful thing to show that you've actually improved these processes fully. So the next tool that we can look to explore is the issue or error log. So having an issue or an error log running in your organization or department is crucial. It helps ensure all problems are recorded as they occur. Now, I've worked in a number of organizations before which either don't have issue or error logs, and trust me, the impact on that is vast. When things go wrong, people don't understand why they're going wrong. They don't actually understand how to identify them, locate where they're coming from, because there's no record of that happening. And those issues and problems happen again and again and again because no one's collecting that information. And we have other organizations that collect that information in error logs, but do nothing with that information. Having an issue or an error log is great, but you need to make sure that you're actually doing something with that information. Otherwise, it's pointless. So it's also crucial to ensure that they are resolved upon entry, with the fix also detailed down for future lessons learned. So when you're writing that issue down, again, don't just write the issue down and walk away. Write the issue down, but as it's being entered into that issue log, you're having conversations with leaders, with managers, with other team members to identify, okay, this is the issue we're dealing with currently. How are we going to resolve that, right? Make it part of the culture of that team. As you write down the issue, you address the issue. You do not just write it down and walk it away. So often, as I've just discussed, organizations record issues and errors, but do very little with the data. And that really should not be the case. This data is gold dust when it comes to fixing issues and avoiding repeat mistakes. If organizations, if leaders, managers, and teams actually acted upon the issues and errors and fixed them for the long term when they came up, this would solve so many issues and problems that organizations discuss on a daily basis. Often they just leave them to fester and become greater problems. Make sure actions come from all of these issues and errors, which is why a log is very important to have. Now, the benefit of this log is that those who caused or saw firsthand the issue are the ones recording the issue, the potential fix, and the controls to put in place after. It puts the onus on the individual here. So for that issue or error log, if you find that issue or error, you should be the one to put that into the log, right? You shouldn't report it to somebody else and then get them to do it. You need to put that into the log and you need to start to solve that problem. So to use these, there are a few simple steps. Firstly, create a template. Now ensure that you have somewhere to store all of this information. The template should ask for details of the issue, who caused it, the root cause, the solutions, the controls, etc. And of course, there is a template attached to this module. Root cause collectively. So if the person entering the information knows exactly what the root cause was, they should put that down. If not, use other root cause analysis tools with those in the known to find out why this is, right? So I might come across the error or issue, but I don't know what caused it. I'm not, it's not my particular remit. I can go to that team or those individuals within my team who know about it, who may have caused the issue, for us to actually work on finding a solution for that. And then make the log visible. This should be done through a monthly meeting with leaders to discuss what went wrong, why, and how it was fixed. Have the log online or somewhere accessible for others to see this. Give actions to owners and ask for feedback regularly on the performance of the controls. So I've had issue logs built and rolled out in organizations before, but I felt like they weren't quite doing the job they could do. So I made sure that in those key meetings with HR or with team leaders or with leaders of the organization, on a monthly basis, we would have those conversations. These are the areas we found this month. This is what we did to fix them. These are our long-term controls, right? It's not about pointing the finger or laying blame with certain people. It's about being honest and upfront, because I can guarantee the more transparent you are as a department around the errors and issues, the more likely you are to see a decrease in the number of issues and errors you face, because people don't want to be seen as those departments that continuously cause errors and issues, right? And you'll see those errors go down. So now let's look at a demonstration of an issue or error log in action. So to build out your error log, you want to have the following categories. You want your issue to be identified, the effect of that issue, the root cause of the issue, the department cause, so which department that actually occurred in and which department caused that issue to happen, whether or not it's a human or technical error, the fix you've identified, the control measures you've identified to ensure that fix stays for the long term, and the owner. So again, not necessarily the person that's going to deploy the solution, but the person that needs to make sure that these things happen, right? The control measures are in place, the fix is in place. That person that's responsible for ensuring this issue is seen through from the cause, the problem, the fix. They have to oversee the whole thing to make sure it's closed off. So let's look at an example. Complaints have risen from an average of 15 to 45 a month this month alone. The effect of this is that handling these means the workload for the team has now increased by 10%. So if you can quantify in the effect section, that is very, very beneficial, because if you need to launch a project to fix this problem, the more figures you have, the more you can show the impact, the better it is. The root cause: new product ranges have not been trained out to the agents. So who caused this? Well, the management of the contact center, because they did not build out training materials. It was a human error, because obviously the management are human. And the identified fix is to build out training packs for the agent prior to new product launches. The control measures identified are checklists to ensure each agent has completed training ahead of the launch. Owner: head of the department. The head of the department will make sure that all of these things happen, and they can sign off to say, yep, the issue has been identified, the cause has been identified, the root cause has been identified, and the fix and control measures are now in place. Let's look at another example. Colleague pay wrong for holiday allowance. So the effect of this: colleague was paid $100 less than expected for that pay cycle. The root cause: the manager loaded the amount after payroll cutoff, so after the system had a close. So the department caused here, the manager, they caused the issue themselves, and again, it was human. The fix: notifications to go out to managers to alert them of the looming deadline. Control measures: notifications act as a control measure. So the fix can sometimes also be a control measure, right? The notification is an automatic notification. That is also a control measure. The owner: the HR system technical team, because we've got a technical solution around notifications. Therefore, they're going to own this to make sure that those continue to actually occur. So the great thing here about the issue and error log is, don't just show, okay, this is the issue, this is the root cause. Yes, we've looked into it, right? Detail exactly who caused it, why it happened, the effect, the issue, the fix, the controls, the owner. Make sure all that information is out there so a discussion can be had around each piece. So next, we're going to talk about some other points that we need to consider here. So let's first of all think about types of causes. So there are 6 main areas in which the cause of issues and errors can break down into. And they are human, physical environment, organizational, process, technology, and data. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Some of these will probably merge over and mix a little bit, and that is absolutely true. But actually, when we're thinking about it from that sort of fishbone diagram, or kind of thinking through breaking these things down, these are the kind of 6 main areas in which you're going to find this. Now, as we identified earlier, 70 to 80% of all issues and errors caused within an organization are down to the human. So the human category is going to come up quite a lot here. And obviously that can break down to a human putting something in wrong to a system, lack of communication, not putting the right meetings in place, a whole host of different things a human could do. The physical environment could be something where the office is not set up correctly for that team. People can't communicate effectively in that team because the actual way that the office is set up is not adequate enough for that team. There's actually a physical problem within the team or within the office where people slip at a specific area, they cause injury. That could be an actual physical issue that could actually impact the business. Organizational, it could mean that the structure of the organization is not set up correctly. Certain levels of leadership haven't got the right skill set in place. Process, there could be a range of different steps within processes that are not value adding, that are causing issues or errors, that are causing rework, that are causing bottlenecks. And obviously you need to dive into that process to understand what that actually is. Technology, often we can implement new systems in organizations and then that technology interface doesn't quite work. The interface stops for some reason. It comes against a block. If it's a bot or an automated or digital worker, that can face issues, which means that work doesn't get done for any number of reasons. And again, with data. Now, data could be a technology issue. So the data hasn't fed through correctly, but also could be human. So the human hasn't put the data in correctly. But fundamentally, that could be a data issue. But again, when you kind of go deeper into that issue, you'll see actually kind of it straddles maybe one or two of these different boxes. So what types of controls can you put in place? So we've identified that there are 6 main areas in which the cause of issues and errors can be broken down into. So here's some examples of the controls you can put into place. So for a human error, you can think about a peer review. So you know that some work isn't being done properly. You have another worker come in and check that work before it gets submitted or entered into a system. Therefore, that work will be 99% more likely to be accurate. Therefore, it's going to remove that issue. The physical environment of the office is not set up properly. Therefore, you say, I'm going to do a weekly 5S analysis where you sort through things in the office, you change the environment, you change the physical environment, and every week you say to yourself, okay, or you ask the team, is this working for us? What can we do physically to change things? From an organizational perspective, think about it in terms of performance. Is the organization reporting effectively enough on its performance? Reporting and analytics is so important when it comes to RCA, and the organization also has a part to play here as well. Process. If you've reformed a process or you know that a process has an issue, give that process an owner. This process then has the ability to be robust because that owner has to continuously report on that process, review the process, make sure it's working effectively. When it comes to technology, if you have third-party providers that give you technology or they give you a payroll system or whatever system you might be using internally, have a meeting with those weekly to make sure that you're root causing all the issues that come up. And again, try and get ahead of those issues. And around data, can you put something like an integrity bot in place to make sure that a bot or a digital worker is looking at the data you've got to make sure there's integrity in the data so that the data doesn't come through as wrong next time? So these are the type of controls. Again, a few examples. There are many, many different examples when it comes to controls that you can put in place, and it's whatever works for you. Some of these will be quite easy and quite straightforward, such as giving a process an owner. Others may be more costly, such as building an integrity bot. So something else you need to consider as well is the importance of people within RCA. So when it comes to RCA, people can often think that it's all about using tools and technicalities to understand what has gone wrong here. And whilst this is true to some extent, it also requires one key component, and that is people. So, as we've stated a few times previously, 70 to 80% of all errors experienced by organizations are caused by people. So if people are causing the issues, they should really be involved in the process of fixing them. Having them in the RCA process is crucial. Let's look at a few points here. So it's important to embed the mindset of RCA into an organization. Ensure teams understand the need to not simply identify or record a problem. We need to ensure that they conduct the RCA themselves and solution it if possible. I've seen many instances where teams will report on issues, say this is what's gone wrong, complain about that, raise it in their daily huddles, and then walk away. We need to start changing the mindset. It's always got to be, this is the problem, and this is the potential solution I've come up with. That's really, really important. RCA is also great for knowledge sharing and learning lessons, but we need to make sure that we share those lessons. Again, often in organizations, we fix things, we have our error logs and our issue logs, and we hold them close to our chest and don't share them with other teams in our organization or globally. We need to start setting up meetings where we show them to other team members and other departments across the organization. This will ensure that repeat errors don't occur within your team but also within other areas of the organization. Share that knowledge. Workshops are crucial if seeking to understand the RCA of a problem. It's about getting people excited about being involved in identifying solutions to the organization's problems. This is us saying, it's not just about you saying what's going wrong. I want you to be involved as a team in what's going wrong. I want you guys to be at the forefront of delivering those solutions. That's a really great way of emboldening the team and bringing them on board. So also implementing issue logs, it builds momentum, because you're allowing team members to record those issues, but also provide that RCA and the potential solutions. This will give them confidence. This will give that team a real confidence that they have a part to play in this whole process. So it's about momentum building, but also about giving them that kind of boost that they are involved throughout this whole process. So people, when it comes to RCA, are very, very important. They give you the knowledge, they give the expertise, they're at the forefront, they can run the workshops. They are really important throughout this whole process. So obviously we've talked about some sessions, and it's really important here to think about how to facilitate a session with that team. So obviously some of these sessions will be around workshops, some will be improvement sessions, some will be knowledge gathering sessions, but it's all about bringing that team together. You need to make sure that you're working with the team that has been directly impacted by that issue. So in these sessions, you're going to basically walk through the process, right? You're going to define the problem. You're going to discuss the data behind it. You're going to brainstorm those potential causes, identify the root causes, highlight potential solutions, and those control measures. So as you can see, the team will be involved throughout the entire process. And it's so right that they are involved throughout this whole process. So there are some things you need to consider when you're running a workshop for RCA. So first and foremost, you need to ensure that you have the right people in the room. This would include those who have been directly impacted by the issue and who will be directly impacted by the solution. I often see times where there are people in these meetings and in these workshops that shouldn't really be there. They don't really know the process, but they're kind of just there putting in their ideas, and sometimes they can be valuable, sometimes they might not be. Make sure the right people are in that room. Make sure also you have the right people with the right attitude. So if you have people within a team who are really interested in solving for these things and have great ideas, and they regularly come to you with these great ideas, make sure that they're included. I've had in many instances where people have come to me with really good ideas. They want a solution, they want to brainstorm, they want to learn these things. Bring them on board. You do not want people in there, negative Nellies that don't want to be there, that would just start to complain about every single issue under the sun and not focus on the actual issue at hand. As a facilitator, do not step in too often. Your job here is to kind of steer people in the right direction, but not give them the answers. Make sure they have the tools they need to complete the job. Don't be too imposing. Obviously, all answers are welcome. Make sure that not one person becomes dominant in these sessions. All answers must be heard to ensure that the session is a success. So just because someone is quiet, it doesn't actually mean that they might not have a great idea, or they might not actually have great insight, and they might have seen something that the person screaming the loudest hasn't actually seen. Make sure that all answers are welcome. So a final point to consider here is a case study. And this case study is something that I've put together based on a real life example that I've worked in. And here it shows you the 6 steps as I follow them through. So this project was actually quite a sizable project for me. This was actually a really, really big project. It involved a whole team of around 12 people, very big department. It was a department-wide issue. But the main steps here that we'll talk through actually show you that you can use this for big projects, but also for small projects as well. So step 1, define the problem. So for me, I had to define that department accuracy was at 97%, but the target for the organization was actually 99.5%. So in terms of the volume of work, they were well behind. I then collected data. So I looked at the internal ticketing software. I looked at issue and error logs. I interviewed team members to get some qualitative information. I reviewed all data inputs and outputs from the department. I collected a whole wealth of data to make sure I could understand what was going on across that department. I then identified causes. Now this meant facilitating many, many team sessions. I used fishbone diagrams, the 5 whys approach, and an FMEA. Process and people were identified as the 2 biggest causes here. So I knew my causes, so I could start to break those down. We then identified the root causes. So Breaking down people and process further, we found that processes were too manual, and then some specific ones had actually broken and they were missing specific checks. For people, it was all about a lack of communication between departments. A lack of RCA on own issues was significant. The teams were very bad at root causing their problems and fixing them. As we kind of break that down further, we then started to think about the solutions and start to implement them. So we conducted a full process by process analysis. I removed all those non-value adding steps to free up time. This freed up time for the team to then actually start working on root causing more. Often the complaint is, we're so busy, we don't have time to root cause. By removing those bottlenecks and those non-value adding steps, I was able to free that team up so they actually could then start focusing on them. We added in peer reviews to make sure for that really important data, as it's flowing out of the team, it's being checked. We set up meetings with key external providers to make sure we're getting ahead of issues. We established huddles to make sure the team could speak openly about any issues they're facing. So these are a few. We put in many, many different changes, and all the solutions are still in place today. Then we have to monitor controls. So I gave the key processes affected an owner. The team lead was then to own the communication with the external departments and make sure that happened. RCA tools were then trained out to the team so they can use them on a weekly, monthly basis. And any broken steps were then reported immediately. We really changed the mindset of that team. We really embedded that RCA mindset into that culture. And that's really important to do. Often with these case studies and examples I've got of projects I've worked on in the past, it's all about mindset and culture, getting that team on board. It isn't about saying that you have to do all of the work yourself. It's about getting the team on board with those quick wins and changing that mindset. And by doing so, the team will take the initiative, they'll take the lead, and they'll deliver that work. So this was a great project. We ended up getting the target from 99.5%. We delivered up to 99.83% and higher, I think. So it was a great project. It did what it needed to do. But again, this is an example of where RCA, the tools and the process, delivered a fantastic project. So now that you understand what root cause analysis actually is, the process you need to follow to deploy it, and the key tools that you can use, I thought it would be beneficial for us to talk through a real-life example of how to deploy root cause analysis within an organization. So we're going to talk through a case study, and this case study is based on a project that I myself delivered within an organization to deliver root cause analysis for a particular issue. So this should help you see how to actually deploy root cause analysis within a live project. So firstly, let's look at how I actually initiated the root cause analysis. So I was working with a payroll department who had a target accuracy level of 99.5%. So effectively, this meant that after every pay cycle, 99.5% of all colleagues would have been paid correctly. Now, at this time, it was trending at around 97%, which was leading to hundreds of colleagues being paid incorrectly at each pay cycle. And it was clear the department had a number of issues. But when I inquired as to why these were, I was told they were not actually too sure. There were too many individual issues a month to really pinpoint this. So this is something you'll often see within root cause analysis if it's a bigger project or you're trying to tackle multiple things at once, is teams and departments saying, there are so many things going wrong. We don't have time to pinpoint one or two things, right? We need to kind of just try to deal with everything on fire, basically, right? This is where people start to be reactive as opposed to being proactive, which is why it's really important that these people know how to deploy root cause analysis themselves. So given this unknown, I knew a root cause analysis was required. I was sat there asking the question, why? And again, if you're asking the question why, you need to then launch a root cause analysis. So how did I manage this? So firstly, I informed the team of the plan and what this would entail. So basically what I would need from them, right? This team, they're the ones that work through the process, they run the process, they own the process. Therefore, they're the ones that are going to do the upfront work for me. So I explained that to them. I then trained out some of the key root cause analysis tools to the team. So in this case, the fishbone diagram and the 5 whys. I knew they could become quite important tools within this project. So I made sure the team knew exactly what they were and talked them through the entire tool. And the activity was very colleague-led. I wanted the team I was working with to feel as though they were fully in control of brainstorming, deciding, and delivering, right? So this is why I trained them on those key root cause analysis tools. So when it came to having those brainstorming sessions, they could lead, and it made them feel really empowered as a team. And I can tell you the difference by going in and having a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach is very, very substantial indeed. This is a very effective way to get good buy-in from the teams, and I informed the wider team and other related teams of the work that was going to come. Right, so obviously the payroll department is a really critical department, so I needed to make sure that the benefits team, the finance team, other teams that could be impacted by this were informed as well. And then we got started on the work. So the way in which we actually conducted this root cause analysis was using that process, that 8-step process, to make sure that we knew what we needed to do at this stage. So firstly, we defined the problem. So I identified clearly that the expectation from the department leads was a 99.5% accuracy rate. Now we were currently trending at around 97%. So therefore, I've clearly defined this is our problem. The indicators have been pointing in this direction for around 3 months at this point. So clearly defining these are our key indicators that are showing we have a problem and the time frame which that problem is occurring. And I stated the impact, the difference of 97.7% and 99.5% is actually hundreds of colleagues being incorrectly paid. So again, you're seeing the impact of this. We need to solve for this issue because the impact is hundreds of colleagues being paid incorrectly. I then went on to collect my data, and I analyzed data over a 3-year period to see where we were. I wanted to understand, is this part of a bigger picture or is it more of a recent trend? And I noticed that we'd actually rarely hit and remain consistently at 99.5% or over this period. Therefore, extensive work was actually needed. Data was presented in monthly accuracy figure form, number of errors, the number of impacted colleagues, and this painted a very dim picture compared to expectations. So expectations were, we wanted 99.5% accuracy rate month in, month out, and we were rarely hitting that at all. And if we were hitting it, we were not consistently hitting that over a period of time. So obviously this indicated that we needed a lot more work to solve this problem. So then we started to identify our possible causes. So as a team, we ran a number of workshops to really understand potential causes. It wasn't just one workshop. We had to run, I think, 4 or 5 workshops to really understand the causes here because we understood it as a wider issue. It wasn't just what is happening now, but what has been happening last year, the year before. What is this consistent issue around not hitting 99.5%? The first workshop was a general discussion, issues faced, problems handled, their thoughts, etc. And then we did an extensive fishbone diagram asking why accuracy was trending below 99.5%. And in this, we identified over 100 potential causes. So obviously we then have to start thinking through, okay, how do we actually start to whittle these down into their actual causes? So we moved on to identify our root causes. So as a team, we conducted a series of 5 whys analyses to understand key causes further. And we identified the following key causes. Firstly, processes were too manual, bloated, and had too many handoffs. Secondly, there was no peer reviewing. So no one was checking the work before it went through to the final stage. And there was no ownership of processes, so people let things slip through the net. Again, as something I've talked about many times in this course, everything should have an owner. Every process, every plan, every action needs an owner, so someone's responsible for that particular work. So further known but less impactful causes were then taken away as recommendations. So then we moved on to identify solutions. And as a team, we brainstormed potential solutions for each of the 3 causes. And this was done through an affinity diagram exercise within the workshop. So the chosen solutions included the following. So to automate the compare process to save 80 hours of time a month. So we talked about a process that's too manual, too bloated, had too many handoffs. The compare process was one of those. And if we could automate that entire process, we could save 80 hours a month for humans, right? We can shift that time into a automatic solution. Have a bot conduct quality checking on data. So we have no peer reviewing or checking. Let's get an automated solution to do that for us. Remove waste from key processes and give key processes an owner each. So once we've identified the solutions, we then obviously had to test those solutions. And over the coming 2 weeks, each solution was tested. Remember, when looking to test your solutions, do not test them over a space of 3, 4, 5 months. Try and get them all done within the same period of time. So the development team tested the idea of a bot running the compare process. The same team used an existing bot to conduct data integrity checks. A number of steps were removed from processes. We then ran them processes to see the impact of those steps no longer being there. And owners were identified for each process as an immediate action. So then we went on to implement those chosen solutions. So a plan for implementation was built to ensure the smooth delivery of solutions. Again, having that good, detailed implementation plan is extremely critical at this point. And this occurred over the coming month. Following the successful piloting of each solution, all chosen solutions were able to be deployed. Teams impacted by the change were consulted ahead of any change to ensure that nothing hit them negatively, and all solutions were deployed on time. So this is where having a really good process comes into play. All solutions were able to be implemented. We didn't have to go back and make massive changes. We didn't have to go back and try and identify a new potential solution, have a new brainstorming session, waste more time. If you follow this process, if you're really clear on this 8-step process, you should never have to go back and change your particular solution. The process works to enable you to reduce time waste, right? You should be able to get things done first time. And so by identifying the right solutions and testing those correctly should enable you to implement all those solutions in that first particular process. And then finally, we went on to build our controls. And as a team, we identified the following controls as critical to this process's success. So control charts were needed to be built to monitor the 99.5% accuracy rate. Any slippage below would be investigated immediately. Each process was given an owner, and during their one-to-ones, these owners would then feed back to their manager or to the team to say, this is how the process is going, this is the long-term trend, and we can identify if there's anything we need to do in that process to tighten up those controls and make the process more secure. And then reports are sent out from the bot after every process run with diagnostics. So these controls, really good controls, those controls are still in place to this day to make sure that process is stable and secure. So what are the key deliverables for this particular project? Well, at the start, we had a Six Sigma level of 3.38. And Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, is a very, very important tool in the world of root cause analysis. It's a whole methodology, it's a whole approach, and you can literally spend 30, 40, 50 hours learning how to do that. So, but for now, let's just look at the Sigma level was 3.38. The total is 6 you can possibly have. And the current percentage off target was 2.5%, right? Our target was 99.5%. We were currently trending at 97%. So we're off target by 2.5%. So our current response, was 97%. So we wanted to get to a Sigma level of 4.08, which would increase our target to 2.5%, which would get us to 99.5%, right? Our target was 99.5%, so we needed to increase that by 2.5%. What actually happened? Well, we were able to realize a Sigma level of 4.38, which was substantially higher than we expected. We were actually able to increase it by 2.8%, which meant that our final realized percentage was 99.8%. So over time, we were able to see a trend of 99.8%, whereas before we saw an overall trend of 97%. So this was a really big, substantial increase, and it led to hundreds of people that before would not have been paid correctly, being paid correctly, just because we launched a detailed, informative root cause analysis that was enabled to fix those problems and fix them for the long term. And I know to this day, that process is still well above 99.5%. And again, that is the power of root cause analysis. So what are the benefits of taking this approach? Firstly, clarity and structure, right? You know exactly what root cause analysis is, what it does, there's an approach that you can take, and there's a structure around it. You've got your 8-step process, you have your tools. And that's the great thing, you have your tools. The toolkit that you can use with root cause analysis is extensive. And there's a different tool depending on the issue, the problem you're trying to solve for. Do you want to find out what the cause was? Do you want to categorize these? Do you want to find a potential solution? Root cause analysis and this approach has a tool for that. It gives you a vision of that outcome. You know, this is the problem, but I know where I need to get to. I know what my actual aim is. And again, within root cause analysis, you can see exactly what the vision of your outcome should be. It's very much data-led because, of course, again, if something's going wrong, those SLAs, those key issues start to flag up. You can then dive into the data to understand further what's going on. The improvements are visual. So again, in the example I've given just now, beforehand, I was seeing hundreds and hundreds of colleagues not being paid correctly, which led to hundreds and hundreds of complaints. We no longer receive those complaints. We no longer receive those colleagues being paid incorrectly. We're not having the knock-on impact of having to go in and fix that. We can see visually the impact of this. And it enables us to put in really good detailed control measures. Root cause analysis is not effective without good control measures. You need to run the whole 8-step process before root cause analysis can be seen as complete. So what were the lessons learned for this particular project? Firstly, act quickly to stop issues festering. So it had become clear for some time that the department was operating at below 99.5% on a consistent level. Now, if the team had acted quicker to address any issues as they arose, this would not have been such an issue. The data was showing that for over 3 years, we were in and out of 99.5%, right? We were not hitting it consistently for a period of time over that 3-year period. We should address this quicker, and we wouldn't have had to have such a big project to fix this. Teach others how to use key RCA tools. Once they use them, the teams fell in love with the key RCA tools, such as the fishbone diagram and the 5 whys tool. Now, if they'd had this knowledge to begin with, they could have fixed their issues as they arose. Now, when issues arise within that team and other teams that have this knowledge, they can pivot, use the tool, fix the problem, deliver the solution, implement the control. They have that knowledge now. So this is about empowering our teams to do that. We don't have to necessarily do it ourselves as leaders or as consultants or as business owners. The teams themselves can do it. And finally, expand your workshop sessions. So it's a good idea to get others into the workshop sessions that may not directly run the process, but are impacted by it. So for example, in the case I've just given, this process was a payroll process, and therefore the payroll team were involved in the workshops. However, the impact of this process is felt in the benefits team. So we should have included some benefits team members in those discussions earlier on too. We did a great job at communicating with them what changes were coming, but if one of those changes had been quite a substantial change for that particular team, we should have included them up front to enable them to have a say. So that is the process that we followed for that particular project. It was fantastic. The outcome was brilliant. It was better than we expected. But again, that is the power of the root cause analysis process and the root cause analysis tools. Those tools and that process, they exist and anyone can do them, but you need to make sure you do it correctly. Just deploying them is not enough. You need to deploy them correctly. Make sure you use them correctly. Make sure you're deploying the right solutions and the right controls. Follow that process through from start to finish, and you should get this really, really big positive impact. So now let's look at some hints and tips that you can deploy when working through your next RCA to ensure that you clinch the best possible outcome. So firstly, you want to train your teams and the wider organization on the key RCA tools. This would ensure they understand them next time they have to actually use them. Embed RCA into the mindset of your teams. Include it in a daily huddle, the next team training session, rotate ownership of the issue or error log, right? Make sure that when people come to your huddles or your meetings, if they come with an issue, they automatically come with a potential solution. Show people that are slow to get on board the benefit to them of RCA, how it can deliver quick and lasting wins in their own role, and show them that it can act as a development opportunity if they get involved and expand their knowledge and their experience, right? If it's new to your organization, RCA as an approach, as a process, all the tools, you may need to spend some time selling it up front first, and that's fine. The best selling point of RCA is when it's been delivered properly, it shows its own merit. Some tools, such as the FMEA, can be live documents, which are constantly updated with new or amended processes. And this is actually a really good idea. And if it's conducted, make sure to give this an owner. Someone should be owning this piece, as they should be owning the tools, the plans, the approach. There should always be an owner. Now, over time, start to let others facilitate workshops too, as to again embed this mindset into the team. Right? Don't just be the person that delivers the tools, delivers the facilitation of workshops. Spread this knowledge and experience and this responsibility around the team. Hold regular meetings to discuss your issue and error log with leaders to show what you are doing from a mitigation and solution standpoint. And again, this will show the benefit of RCA if you can show exactly what you're doing to mitigate any of these problems and issues going forward. Make sure that issue log is a live document that is being utilized effectively. So at this stage, there's not much more for me to say other than thank you for taking this course. Please do use the templates and the slides in the resources section of this course to ensure you guarantee your next RCA project. All the best for success in the future, and thank you so much.